Any questions, council? I don't see any. Oh, Councillor Flynn?
What was contributed to enhance the viewer performance at a hockey game, or viewer experience, I mean? Did we contribute towards that as well last year?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And that just got completed in late December, so my apologies, it happened well after this all came about. And it's, as a result of the naming rights agreement extension that we negotiated, and of course council approved as well with the Shaw Cable Systems Limited, we have an additional 15-year agreement for the naming rights that will contribute $20,000 roughly a year for 15 years going forward. And in addition, that contributed close to, I think it was $413,000 in capital money that has gone towards a video wall and sound system upgrade at the Shaw Centre. That's been installed, and they're currently training and utilizing that in the facility now.
So the society actually didn't have to contribute much. It was just part of an overall naming agreement, but we did have some costs as well.
There may have been some small electrical upgrade costs, but for the most part, that entire amount was funded through that naming agreement.
So a significant increase in the value of our asset.
Absolutely.
Through the naming agreement.
Just like to add that we won't be formally announcing that yet.
Oh, okay.
So we plan to partner with Shaw in a formal announcement in the next coming weeks.
So can we ask the media to pretend they didn't hear that, please?
And I think it's worth noting that we have received money from private persons, businesses, and have done probably in excess of $500,000 worth of capital improvements that haven't been funded by the taxpayers. So.
Okay. Well, I'll let you deal with media because I didn't realize I was asking something. Okay.
Yeah, they're a part of that as well. We will be speaking to them.
Okay, great.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Any other questions around Shaw Centre? Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Can I just ask, Your Worship, under expenditures, the $25,000 administration fee, is that the fee that is paid to the city for work that we do, or that's their own in-house? On page 139, $25,000 administration fee, that seems low for a $1.2 million.
Oh, Your Worship, that is insurance.
Oh, I see. Okay.
On page 141, it's insurance for the property.
141. I see. Okay, thank you. Sorry
Thank
about
you.
that.
No, that's okay. Councillor Flynn.
I know it's going to drive Councillor Lyson crazy, but council comment here, or quick comment. I think it's really important to note that the city, staff, the community itself, the speed at which we paid off the debenture debt for the Shaw Centre, and the fact that it's done in, when did we build that? 99. So we're paid off in 20 years, and then buying that property as well, which wasn't necessarily anticipated, and paying that off. Significant assets for the community, and you guys have done a great job managing them, and I just think staff should be complimented as well for the discipline to pay off our debt ahead of time, and then we can just go spend it on other debt.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Just a question to the Chief Financial Officer. I think the debenture payments on Shaw Centre, we know that we're going to transfer that debt payment to the Ross Street underpass. So the difference this year, is it because of difference in timing, or is it a difference in the amount of payment?
It's timing. So this year we have some cost savings because of when our principal payments are made, so we're saving essentially 6 months worth of interest. 2019, when we incur the debt for the Ross Street underpass, we won't actually need to make a payment until 2020. So our capacity from the Shaw Center will be transferred to the Ross Street underpass debt.
Okay, I understand then. Thank you very much. Okay, I don't see any other questions around the Shaw Center. So let's go to the, can we skip over parks and go to Recreation Center? Or, because Jason probably will do the parks, is that right? Okay, so is that okay with the Chief Financial Officer if we go to the Recreation Center first? All right.
The Recreation Center reflects a nominal increase. Again, the Shuswap Recreation Society approved a rate increase of 5% as well, for an anticipated additional revenue of $29,000. The new revenue has mitigated the impact of reduced program revenues, costs associated with the aquatics manager, and facility and other wage costs. The budget also proposes to allocate an additional $15,000 to the operating reserve and $35,700 towards capital expenditures. Following the completion of the budget, the Shuswap Rec Society has recommended that the equivalent of part-time hours be converted to a full-time lifeguard position in 2019. This recommendation comes as a result of ongoing issues with insufficient aquafit skills, risks associated with unsupervised underage employees, as well as to provide the potential for increased operating hours. The cost associated with this conversion is estimated to be approximately $31,000. This has not been included in the 2019 budget as of now, and a motion of council would be required to do so.
Thank you. I'd invite Darby and Dale to comment on this budget.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So I'd like to sort of just normalize one of the big items in our budget this year that was the $90,000 in consulting fees. So our budget from last year would be reduced by $90,000 right off the bat to sort of normalize that for this year. In addition, there was a position upgrade last year in the amount of $28,000 that council agreed to at that time, and is also a part of that normalization, bringing our overall budget this year to $612,199 in my calculation. Once again, it's worth noting that in both facilities we've looked at a rate increase and incorporated that into this budget. And on this ASCU side, the rate increase will equivalize to about $29,000 for the year. I think the other thing, as Chelsea's mentioned, is that we were subsequent to the submission of the budget. We've been requested to have an increase in hours for certain, I guess you would say prime hours, weekend hours, to try and increase the amount of hours that were open to the public. And as a part of that discussion, one of the other things that we feel we're lacking considerably is the ability to host sufficient aquafit classes. We also have, with only 2 full-time staff, we have inadequate coverage for senior staff in the evenings and on weekends, which is typically our busiest times. So generally, at those times we're staffing with junior staff, and so as a part of that, in order to sort of cover both situations, we feel that the addition of that third full-time position, converting the part-time hours to a third full-time position, would allow us to mitigate those difficulties that we're facing. The incremental cost to do that would be $31,000.
Thank you very much. I'll open it to questions from council. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you. So in that 31,000, is there the ability, because I think what I was hearing at our Recreation Society meeting is that maintenance, having staff to do maintenance, was also an issue for hours to be extended. So is that 31,000 just for a lifeguard, or are we touching on that issue as well?
Your Worship, The two issues are essentially separate. The 31,000 is only for the lifeguard position. The maintenance hours, we don't need an increase in maintenance hours to make that happen. The one difficulty we do have is that Sunday mornings is our opportunity to dump the pools and completely sanitize them and then refill them in order to be ready for Monday morning. And so on Sunday mornings when we are typically closed, we still have maintenance on staff at that time doing those duties. So we would not require an additional maintenance hours to affect that, if that answers your question.
So if we did get the extra staff, we still would have an issue being open on Sunday mornings?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. On Sunday mornings is when we dump the two pools,
Yeah.
and it doesn't make a lot of sense to have maintenance working on the pools while we have the public in the building.
And could we look at doing it later, like a week night? Like, is that something that we could look at? I know we had this discussion when I was at the meeting, so I was just curious. But in saying that, I actually want to make a motion that we add to this budget the extra staff.
So that your motion would be to add the 31,000, Councillor Cannon?
Yeah.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lindgren. Speaking to the motion, Councillor Cannon.
Speaking to the motion, what I'm hearing at the table at our meetings is that the pool is really running on bare bones staff. And we need more staff to support the rest of the existing lifeguards and to be able to extend the hours. Because what I'm hearing out in the public is that our hours are very sparse and that there's an appetite to support more better hours at the pool for families.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn, speaking to the motion.
Yes, need some clarification, please and thank you. The incremental cost that you spoke to of 31 is not in this budget, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then the motion that Councillor Cannon has brought forward does not solve the Sunday morning requests for family pool time?
Not for that particular morning. It does allow us more opportunities for potentially definitely Saturday afternoon, potentially Sunday nights and Saturday mornings, depending on what is decided. So those are times that are, depending on the season, are also closed to the public. So we can increase hours in those stretches without affecting the maintenance side of things where we have to be closed for some stretch. So it would still allow us to increase the hours in those other times.
Okay, because I find it interesting, and Councillor Cannon is now your rep there, so your meetings are probably going faster without me there, but I was on that committee for the last 4 years, and I think that the demographics of our community have changed. I think the users would welcome Sunday morning openings. I don't know if they can work, but I'm very much in support of this improving potential. Whether we can make Sunday mornings work or not, I don't know, but if we can have more weekend times for young families. It's interesting that consultant that we spent $90,000 on, one of the major reasons for not using our pool facility was hours and openings and inflexibility in schedule. And I think that Sunday morning might change that. I don't know. I know years ago, very few people wanted to use it Sunday morning, but our demographics are changing, and even if we can open Saturday morning, one of the days on the weekend I think would be important. So I'll vote in favor of this motion. I'm not sure Sunday can be done because I understand you flush the pools and that's when we do all of that. But I would sure like to see more flexibility on weekends for families.
Thank you. Councillor Lindgren. Speaking
Thank
to
you.
the motion.
Yes, I was just wondering if you could break down what the $31,000 does. So the information we have says that you would convert part-time hours to full-time hours. Is there a significant change in wage when they go to a full-timer, and is that why the amount is so high? And will that person also be getting benefits?
Yes, just 1 second, please, Your Worship. What's here? I can comment as I find it here. So there is an increase in wage rate, not significant. I will give the amount shortly. There's also an increase in the overhead rate, and the overhead rate reflects the additional benefits. So a part-time, for example, with our staff, a part-time person, there's an overhead rate that covers their benefits, and for the full-time person, that overhead rate increases. So there's an increase that covers both sides of that. And hopefully I can find it here shortly. 1 sec.
Yes, go ahead.
I can
Yeah,
respond.
follow up.
So I'm in favor of this, obviously. As a union president, I'm well aware of how many people work in precarious positions in Salmon Arm and around our province, and how hard it is to make a living based on part-time hours and lack of benefits. And so I'm happy to hear that more full-time positions, for me, that's better. I'd still be curious if you have numbers, what the improvements would be. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery?
Yeah, thanks. Mayor Harrison. So sort of along.
Uh-oh, did I cut you off?
Well, I'm not sure. I might have interrupted you. So.
No, I'm sorry. You go ahead, Darby, and I thought you were going to get the answer later, but you go ahead and answer.
I found it.
Perfect, okay. And then we'll go to Councillor Lavery if you're okay.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so the rate difference between a part-time and a lifeguard one, these are QP rates, so it's about a $6.50 per hour. The overhead rate goes from somewhere in the 24 to the 52% range. So there's that component to it. So the number of hours does not change, but when you increase the rate and then increase the overhead, which covers the benefit side of things, that turns into $31,000, $431 to be specific.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lavery?
Thank you, Mayor Harrison. Will it be easier to recruit a full-time than a part-time employee?
Through your worship. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the point I wanted to sort of get to next, is that the local labor market is really, we're really struggling with that. One of the things we've had to do is change our swim lesson programs this year to a sort of a lower level of instruction, from water stroke instruction to safety, more of a safety oriented instruction. And the reason is that we've got about five of our part-time people that are available during daytime hours, and the rest of them are students, so they aren't available till 3:30, 4 o'clock. And so we've had to reduce the number of lessons that we can offer and the level that's at. And having that third guard, although it doesn't really dramatically increase that, it does give us one more person that's there to try to build up that daytime complement of people that we can have available for those lessons. And the 5 people that we do have, to further to answer your question, they have multiple careers, multiple jobs, and so commitment is difficult for them. No more than we can commit to them, they can't commit to us. And so we find that we're scrambling on a regular basis, where they call in sick and we're not able to fill those spots because all of our other guards are at school.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you alluded to it, but could you talk a little bit about just how this proposal will impact, I think it's positive, but your underage employees?
Yes, I think that one of the biggest things is having a senior person there in the evenings and on weekends, and those are typically our biggest swims. It'll help, first of all, just on the safety side, the risk management side of things. You've got somebody that is in charge essentially, rather than 4, 16, 17-year-olds that are trying to make a decision at the busiest times of the year. So, and then they also have the mentorship and the just helping them through those difficult times. So,
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Lavery. I just have a couple of questions. They are related to the motion, although they might not sound like it at first. So when you say flush the pool once a week, like do we empty the pool and the hot tub once a week?
The wading pool and the hot tub we empty. We don't have the capacity because the bodies of water aren't sufficient that we can maintain them like we do the larger lap pool. So they have to be emptied. It's part of a requirement from Interior Health as well. So that historically that's been the most reasonable time to do it, to get the pool up and running and heated by the afternoon swim. It starts at 1 o'clock.
Okay, that's useful for me because that's information I did not know. I'm always searching for ways to pay for things, and so and that's why I'm asking these two questions. The pool toy, is that something that could wait a year? Because it would help offset the cost of any increase to lifeguards. And the pool toy is on page 164.
I can start speaking to that, and then maybe Dale can add something if he wants. The pool toy, we traditionally used the pool toy to fill low demand times, and in spite of the fact that Sunday mornings is a contentious or a time where maybe we could fill it, there are times when we can't get young people into the pool, and so the pool toy, we've had one for close to 10 years at least, and we've worn it out. We patched it a number of times, and it got to the point where it just started leaking through every seam on it, and so it was time to change it. Because we don't have a water slide or a lazy river, climbing wall, any of those other things, for us to get the young people in there, that's the thing that we found increased demand during those low demand times.
Okay, I understand. I was looking for, and this may be to the Chief Financial Officer, I was looking for the reserve fund for the pool, because I see we've made a $50,000, proposed $50,000 contribution, and the only one I could see was recreational center operating, which is on the third yellow page, but that did not seem to be the right one. Is there another one?
Yes, Your Worship, there is a Recreation Center Major Maintenance Fund.
Okay, I saw
And that's
that
at the
one.
very first page,
Got it.
at the top.
Okay, so, but that also does not show $50,000 going in.
That's a $30,000 transfer is going to that, and $20,000 to the operating reserve.
Ah, yes, that adds up. Okay, thank you. Can we purchase a water toy from the Recreation Center Major Maintenance?
The fund?
Yes.
I would say probably not, but I would have to review the bylaw in more detail.
Okay, because I have an alternative to that, and the alternative is that we don't put the $30,000 into the fund, that we put it into the other reserve, the operating one. Can we purchase a pool toy from the Recreation Center operating fund?
Yes, but if you're going to do that, I think it would be easiest to just redirect those monies from the reserve transfer to the pool toy and just reduce the reserve transfer.
Yes. Okay. So I just want to know that in advance of the voting on this motion. So I will bring it forward after the motion, depending on how the motion goes. Is there any other questions about the motion to add the 31,000? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Eliason is opposed. I would like to bring forward a motion then related to the reserves. And I would ask, I just want to check them out first. So on page 162, we're proposing we put 50,000 into reserves. We put 35 into reserves last year. So the pool toy is worth 14,000. So I'm thinking of two things. One is I'm thinking of putting 21,000 as a transfer to reserves and leaving the pool toy item as is. So my motion would be to reduce the transfer to reserves from 50 to 21,000. Is there someone that would second that motion? Councillor Cannon? Thank you. So I'll just explain my math one more time. Presently, last year we put 35,000 into reserves in 2018. This year it's proposed we're going to put 50. The pool toy costs 14, so 50 minus 14 is 36. I'm suggesting that we put the same amount of money, or equal to the same amount of money as last year, 35,000. So if you take away 15, you get 21. So that's where my money came from. What's that?
Buy the toy.
We have to buy the toy, and I want to reduce the amount that we're putting into the reserve.
Isn't the toy already in there?
Doesn't want to pay for it, general revenue.
Okay.
50 minus 36.
So hang on, maybe my math isn't right.
36 minus 15.
It's only 14,000, so 36.
Yeah, 36,000 or 36. What is it, 15,000?
Okay. What I want to do is I want to reduce the reserve. We're going to leave the pool toy in there. So we won't talk about that. I want to reduce the reserve to the same amount as last year, which would be 35,000, which would be a $15,000 saving. But I also want to subtract the price of the toy off of that, 14,000. So that's where the 36,000 comes from. So it's down to 21,000 for the reserve. I think the only motion we need is to reduce transfer to reserves to $21,000.
Well, we still have a motion on the table right now.
No, voted on it.
So I would,
There's a motion on the floor.
and what is the motion on the floor?
It's to reduce it from 50 to 21,000.
That was the
Moved
motion.
by Councillor Harrison, or Mayor Harrison, seconded by Councillor Cannon.
Okay, thank you. Discussion over that motion. Councillor Eliason.
Okay, so just to clarify the motion, we're going to leave the taxation, general revenue paying for $14,000 pool toy. Nothing's happening with that. But we are going to reduce the amount going into reserves by $29,000 instead. And is that the $20,000 or $30,000 reserve?
I would suggest that the 21,000 go into the operating reserve, not the fund.
Okay, and nothing going to the fund.
That's right.
You say the fund, the major maintenance.
Do you understand where the money comes from? Okay.
I get it, but I don't think everybody else does on this, because the elephant in the room is the pool toy now that we still want to keep. So you just want to reduce the amount going into one of the reserves, or essentially just eliminate one of the funds.
That's right.
And so just to leave $1,000 going into it?
Yeah, because the reason I choose that is the Recreation Center Major Maintenance Fund has $684,000 in it. So it would remain at $684,000 plus interest. So the balance actually would be $724,000 at the end of 2019.
Okay.
So a little bit-
Your worship, maybe I'm just needing to clarify your motion. So your motion is to reduce the amount of money going into the Recreation Major Maintenance Reserve Fund from $30,000 to $1,000.
It could be that. It works the same way.
Okay, because we still have $20,000 going into the other reserve fund, and you're reducing it by 14 for the pool toy, and 15 to match last year's contribution to reserves.
That's right.
Okay, so the motion, as I understand it, is from $30,000 to $1,000.
Yes, it could be said that way, but if you look at page 162,
Yep.
and it says $50,000 going into transfer to reserves, I thought it would be simpler just to say, put $21,000 in instead, but apparently that was not simpler.
No.
But we are saying the same thing, yes.
And then we have
Okay.
So let me just check with staff. So I think staff understands what I'm trying to do. And is it easier to reduce the 50,000 to 21, or like Councillor Eliason suggests, reduce the 30 to 29 to 1?
The motion has to be specific. So the pool toy costs $14,000. The difference between 50,000 and 14 is 36. So you are wanting to reduce it down to 35. Is that right?
The contribution into the reserve, I want to reduce by
it to what?
35 minus 14.
Right. So essentially, you're saying we've added $15,000 to the reserve balance budget this year, and you want to bring that back down to what it was before and use that extra $15,000 to fund the pool toy.
Yes. You could say
But
it
then
that
you
way.
have $1,000 left.
That's right.
So you're going to then increase the operating reserve transfer, which if it was based on last year, it would bump that one account up to $6,000. But you're suggesting we eliminate the $30,000 transfer altogether and just move the total $21,000 to the operating reserve.
That's right.
Does that make sense to
Yep.
everyone?
Makes sense to me.
It would have been easier if you
miss
looked at page
something?
164. Would have been really simple.
Yes, 160.
Yeah.
164 would have made it real simple. Eliminate the major maintenance, add 1,000 to operating.
So
Would have been the same thing.
That's 6 1, half dozen the other.
Okay.
30.
Let's go through speakers then. So Councillor Eliason, you're finished?
21,000 net,
Yeah,
plus a pool toy on the
that's
side.
right.
All right, everybody's happy.
Councillor Cannon.
So in there, then we have enough to cover the motion that was passed
Yes.
for the 31,000. And we haven't lost the pool toy. And we are a little bit, taking a little bit less from, we're transferring a little less in from reserves. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, phew. Glad we didn't lose the pool toy, because
Thank you,
important.
Councillor Flynn.
I mean, I kind of see the $1,000 back into operating reserve as irrelevant, and why?
Well, you're putting 20 in anyways,
Yeah, so anyhow, I'm voting in support.
okay? Thank you. We'll give Darby and Dale any opportunity that they would like to, if they want to say anything.
Which is 35,000 between the two.
I wouldn't mind commenting just on the,
Just about this motion first, because I want to get the
okay.
vote on the motion.
Sorry.
But if you want to say anything about the motion before we vote on it. No, okay. Councillor Flynn, did you want to speak again?
Not on the motion.
Okay. All right, all those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Passed unanimously. All right, go ahead, Darby and Dale.
okay, I just want to make a comment on, on the perceived inability for people to use the facility. We did the public consultation with our consultants last summer, and we did have a lot of respondents that that said that hours of operation was an issue. We're having the consultants clarify exactly what that means, because there's a lot of times when people want to use the facility when it's in use for something else, making it, you know, it's not available to them. So we have situations where the main pool is used by clubs for swimming, swim lessons, aquafit, schools. People come in varying times during the day and evening when they can't use that pool. And the other two pools aren't worth paying the admission to come in. So I think that's a lot of the frustration. Not necessarily particularly a Sunday morning or a weekend time, but we do have extra capacity on the weekends to increase public swimming. And historically, it hasn't really proven to be viable, but I think that given Councillor Flynn's comments about the changing dynamics of the community, that maybe it's time to test those waters and add more public swimming on Sunday evenings or Saturday, extend Saturday afternoons and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for clarifying that too. Appreciate it. Darby, go ahead.
Your worship, sorry. I just wanted to mention too that this will be the last time you'll have the opportunity to beat Dale up on a budget. So after been coming here for 11 years with Dale, and this is his last one as far as I understand it. So.
Well, I know that I share council's appreciation, Dale, of all you've done for both Shaw Centre and the Saskew. And of course, we'll see you around town, but we wish you all the best in your retirement.
Thanks.
I think Councillor Flynn might have a question for Dale before he retires.
Yeah. Well, it might be for Darby, but we just talked about that pool toy, and we talked about a time when the pool isn't used and we're getting the pool toy to try to get people in at that time. I guess all I would like us to look at, and I know Sundays haven't worked in the past necessarily, there hasn't been the demand, but if there is a time that we're buying something to try to get people into the pool, perhaps that's when maintenance can be done if we find weekends are popular. I don't want to micromanage what you guys do. I'm hearing from young families that weekends are important. And that's when a lot of parents spend time with their kids and want to be able to use the facility. And so I don't know when that might be that you need the pool and things to attract people. And I understand about the hours. Thank you for clarifying that, because you're right. The consultant's report said that, but it doesn't necessarily mean it was because it was Sunday mornings. It was other people using it. But and then the last question is both to either you or staff. The access door for the auditorium, is that, I mean, to me that would be maintenance, or operating or maintenance. We're fixing a door to make it more accessible. Can we not take that out of general revenue and put it through a reserve? And thank you for putting that in the budget, because we've heard a lot about that.
It's in the capital budget.
Chief Financial Officer?
Your worship, we could likely fund that from the Recreation Center Major Maintenance Reserve Fund.
I'll make that motion.
A motion.
Seconder, Councillor Lavery?
I finally get one that works.
Discussion around that motion. Councillor Canada, did you want to speak to that motion? Okay. Anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Lyson, did you want to speak to the motion?
I'm scared that...
Just wait. Okay.
I'm scared that every time somebody is threatening or is saying, oh, I'm going to retire, they get all the budget stuff they want. Is that how we're trying to keep them? You get a door, you get a toy, you get a staff. Don't take any notes out there.
Okay, all those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much to both of you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Good job. That was a good one. Okay. Wharf. Chief Financial Officer. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thanks for the reminder. Yes, we're going back.
Jason, too bad.
Going back.
We're done.
Back to parks.
We're just starting to get creative.
Thank you for keeping me straight. Okay, Chief Financial Officer, we will go back and look at the parks budget.
Your worship, the parks budget reflects an increase in municipal funding of $51,800 and is largely attributed to increasing labor costs and costs associated with pile removing at Clares Cove. Overall, the increase has been mitigated by both a reduction in capital and major maintenance expenditures of $143,000.
Thank you. Jason, would you like to come up?
Actually, it'll be myself.
Oh, okay.
I'll rely on Jason if I can answer the
Okay,
questions.
we'll wait for you to call him if you need to. Would you like to comment on the parks budget?
I would, Your
Director of Engineering?
Worship. So in regards to the pile removal at Clares Cove, as you all know, that used to be a marina, and we had removed the docks at that marina when the lease expired, essentially. But we left the pilings in place in order for a potential opportunity to maybe have another marina there at some point, but now the province has come along. When we wanted to renew our waterfront lease of the area, they asked us if we had a plan, and we don't have a plan right now. So now they've come along and said that we have to remove the pilings, and they are a bit of a danger issue for us as well. So the pile removals are in the budget. They're in the parks budget. And they are for that specific purpose. We are currently working to put together a permit of works with the province, with Flynn Rowe, in order to do that, and we'll see where that goes. Another thing I'd like to mention, there's a lot of major maintenance. I'm sure you saw the list of major maintenance items in the budget, and a lot of those are to do with the trails, and we work pretty closely with Shuswap Trail Alliance to do a lot of these projects. And one of the things that we typically do is each year through the Greenways Liaison Committee, we set a budget of approximately $50,000 to go towards either improving trails, making new trails, doing global signage, doing planning exercises. This year, again, in an effort to kind of reduce some of the budget load, we focused on, instead of the $50,000 budget, we focused on one major project, and that is to improve, in a phased state, improve the parking at South Canoe. So right at the head of the trail, the South Canoe Trails, we're looking at doing a project there for about $30,000 to try and relocate the parking off of the roadway and into the park area. So we have a number of things going on there. The other capital expenditure that we're looking at is general trail improvements. And this is an account about $5,000 that gets expended when we have issues in trails. So Trail Alliance will come across, or if we have issues come up with drainage or something like that, that's where that account goes. It's a small one, but it's definitely used. Where we took away from the account, we took $15,000 out of that 50. And because we have a number of carry forward projects already, such as global signage is a carry forward of $35,000. We are working with Trail Alliance. They have a number of years in backlog for the trail signage. And so we took the money out of that. We reduced our budget, as well as the urban connector trail improvements. And that's another one that's been ongoing. So we've taken $15,000 out of the trails budget. And most of that is because of the carry forwards. We're trying to clean up all these carry forward projects. And hopefully the Trail Alliance will be able to get those finished off this year, and then we can start fresh next year. There was a request to actually add to the budget by another $50,000. So again, there is a lot of demand out there, but we're trying to mitigate that and trying to be realistic in our wants and our needs. One thing I would like to point out is the Jackson Park improvements, the Bike Skills Park. There's $145,000 in that account. And that came out of, in 2017, in November 2017, we had an open house in Canoe, and we talked about what improvements we could do at Jackson Park. It's a small park. Some of the things that came up, some of the things that we have to do, there's two budgets in there. You'll also see on the capital budget sheet that there's Jackson Park improvements on hold pending a council report. Well, technically, both of those are on hold until the council report comes forward because we have to have a plan. Now, part of the plan is to build some type of a skate park or bike park within the old tennis court area. And that is what we've earmarked the $145,000 for. And the $20,000 in the budget, that's to repair the fencing, the asphalt, and do site prep in order to make it ready for that potential bike park. The Blackburn Park Bike Skills Park for $30,000. That is a project that started 2 years ago as well, and we had discussion with the bike users in the community, and it basically was going to be a BMX park bike, and it was going to be a temporary bike, BMX park bike in the piles of material that we're stockpiling in order to lift Blackburn Park up. Through the discussions and the meetings we had, the direction changed a bit, and it was to construct a pump track essentially just south of the existing skate park. And so that's why this $30,000. This $30,000 is not sufficient to actually build a permanent pump track there. This would barely get us to the point where we'd have a gravel pump track of some form, possibly without some asphalt. So this isn't, again, the report has to come to council, because at the time City Council decided that they would focus on that stockpiled area. But again, through those discussions and those meetings, it was relocated to where in our master plan it shows a, actually Carl, if I could get my screen on, I can just bring that plan up. So this plan has changed a bit over the years. And one of the major changes is, instead of having this area here as a play area, that it will maintain as a ball diamond. So we will maintain the 2 ball diamonds that are there now. And this area will turn into another soccer field. And that is essentially to eventually replace Safeway fields at some point. Because right now at Safeway fields, that's where we have all the small youngsters practicing and playing on half fields. And so the intent is that when Safeway Fields eventually develops, because we, the city, own half of that field, and the school district still owns the other half, and it's my understanding that the school district is looking to divest of that property at some point in time. So the planning is that we would build a smaller, not a full-size soccer pitch, but it would allow, again, the youngsters to be able to play there. Now, this area is where the pump track is being proposed, and it was for in the plan, it was for a multi-use hard surface court where you could play lacrosse, you could play street hockey, very similar to the one that's at Jackson, or Jackson High School. So a report has to come to council with some costing and whatnot for that particular bike skills park. Both of those amounts are coming out of the reserves that we've built up thus far. So just for a little bit of clarification.
That's helpful, thank you. Any other items you'd like to talk about before we get to questions? Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through you to the Director of Engineering. Those 2 projects, the Jackson Park improvements, the mini or the scooter park, also known as a trick park for the kids on their scooters, and Blackburn Park, the bike skills park. If you look at those 2 together, could it be that one has a fairly significant budget and the other one's a little bit short funded, and we might be able to balance that out?
I would agree. I think that would be a good avenue to go. The bike, or sort of the scooter park, whatever we're calling it for Jackson, we had some estimates for around the $100,000 mark.
Okay.
So that would leave approximately $40,000
Okay.
in surplus.
All right.
Potentially.
Okay, great, thank you. But we should still leave that amount there, and then we might have to redistribute depending on that report.
Yes,
Okay.
through your worship, we would bring a report back, kind of looking at both of those options, and then and basically bring them both at the same time to council that a decision could be made.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. Just, I didn't see anything on the gazebo or whatever we want to call the performing stage at Marine Park. And I understand there's going to be some improvements to not have to cancel Wednesdays on the wharf because of rain. Is there no cost to the city for that? Is that being done by Rotary, or I don't see it, or have you hid it somewhere?
It is in here. It is in the major maintenance, and it's the Marine Park gazebo eaves troughs.
Okay,
And they were slated to go in this fall, but unfortunately they didn't get finished, so it's a carry forward project. We'll identify that. It'll be updated in the budget. So the eaves troughs will be installed, and that will help to capture the water that's draining off the roof.
okay.
So
So that didn't have to be in the capital expenditure budget. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Eliason.
Just a quick update on the Klahani Park playground. It's $90,000. Plans, thoughts, what are we doing?
Jason has prepared a cost estimate for that, for the upgrade, and that's essentially what it would cost to put it in. I don't have any digital photos of what was being proposed, but he's got some in our budget.
Okay.
So when it'll go out for RFP, and then when it comes back, we'll obviously have some concepts.
And the picnic shelter at Blackburn Park will go in this year. That's $65K.
Yeah, it's actually the budget. The total budget for it was well over 100.
Okay.
But we've engaged the contractor, and that will be happening in the spring. There was some issues with the geotechnical report and the structural engineer for the footings, so it didn't get into place before the snow fell. What snow?
Your Worship, I know it's not in parks, but can we get the last picture up, and maybe can I have some leniency just to talk about a specific referral that while we're on it?
Yes, please do. I know it's on topic, so.
Yeah, the Blackburn Park master plan, if we could again.
Okay. I just closed it. I'll have to bring it up here.
So it says in specific referrals that this is a more expensive sort of fix, and I'd requested this because people using the Life Trail Network are using this trail. But it's not a trail at this time, and it's the trail that runs from 10th Avenue Southwest to the end of the soccer field, which.
Is that what you're looking at, right? Is that what you're looking for, is the trail? Yeah, so we can use this one.
Yeah, this one here, right here. And is the $20,000 estimate in specific referrals, does that include level grading and paving? Or is that just a gravel standard at that point?
Check.
So what I'm hoping for is maybe to get it for cheaper, because right now it's sort of it's just a path with some uneven sort of things, and I know that I'm fine with it. But if I was a bit older, like, and I had bad hips.
Yeah, I just have to find it in the referrals here. Sorry.
I exist.
Which number is it?
Might be under me.
In our binder, it's N for no. It's not on there.
It might be up higher, higher on the priority list. Is that what we're looking for? Anyway, we can move on. I just wanted to show the map of what it was and seeing if there's a cheaper way for us to do it.
So, Your Worship, in response to Councillor Eliason's question, it was just for an aggregate surface.
$20,000.
Yeah, just to make the trail with an aggregate surface, not an asphalt surface.
Oh,
There it is. And
Yeah,
Councillor
and-
Eliason, and
yeah, that was me asking for money. Yeah, right there. So it's $20,000 to do that trail made out of
Gravel.
gravel.
So Councillor Eliason, can I ask you to think about that and come back to it in specific referrals?
I was assuming, I'm thinking about it right now.
Thank you. Councillor Lindgren.
I forgot what I was gonna say.
Now, there was an item, Councillor Lindgren, that you were going to bring up in part.
Oh, so Yes, so I think Mr. Nieuwenhuizen spoke to that. It was about the bike skills park. So I guess what I want to know is if we're still putting money away for these things, what's the estimated time of building the bike skills park, and what's the other one called? A scooter park, perhaps? Is that what you said?
Yes, there's the scooter park at Jackson in Canoe, and then it would be a pump track and I've got to show you a picture of a pump track here.
What is a pump track?
So this is a pump track, and it's for all levels of ages and whatnot. The reason that we would like to have it as a hard surface and not a gravel surface is because it's directly adjacent to the skateboard park. And if it rains and gets muddy, there's liability issues for us if that gets tracked onto the skateboard park. So the one in Jackson is more of a fabricated skate park / scooter park, something like this. This is about $120,000 worth of cost. I don't have a firm estimate on the pump track, but we would hope that we could do some planning in the spring and bring a report back and then hopefully go out to some quotes.
And, sorry, what was the last part?
And hopefully get some quotes and then hopefully get, you know, if all works out well, we can go out for RFP and maybe have construction in late summer, early fall.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay, and that's Jackson Park and Canoe. Other questions from councillors? Okay, I have a couple that I'd like to ask. On page 153, the City Hall Courthouse Facility Plaza. I'm wondering about the word mark that's presently out in our plaza, and it's deteriorating. And I'm wondering if there is a plan to replace that with our new word mark, if any of these funds are about that.
Your Worship, there is no funds to replace that at the moment. We haven't identified that as a project. We will have an issue in trying to remove that. That might be a costly removal for the time being. So,
could I delay that that thought for 1 year and have something prepared for next year's budget to talk about it? Okay, that would be great. Thank you. Moving forward to page 159. Two items there I wanted to point out. One is 2739 1730. So we are not proposing on collecting data for the Foreshore Trail in 2019. We have done that for I think 3 years now. And I just wanted to make sure that that was Council's intention, that we now have enough data to know what we want to do there. If anyone feels differently, they can bring it up. Park signage replacement, which is about just near the bottom, 2739. I believe that, is that the Marine Park sign?
no, Your Worship, that is actually to put addresses on all of our parks signs. That was a request from Emergency Services. That has now been complete, so this is a carry forward amount.
Okay. All right, I understand that Rotary is going to replace the sign at Marine Park and we're going to install it. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's whatever we need in the budget is there. Just going to the next page, and it's also on the...
Your Worship, if I could just jump back to that $4,200 for the addresses on
Yes.
the signage, we may need that for the installation of the sign that Rotary puts in.
Okay, that's what I thought it was for, so...
That's kind of what we did want to just save that as a...
Okay, fair enough, because I know it was in-kind work that we were doing. Looking at 161, a couple of things. The Expo signage, I know it's a carry forward, and that's the Expo signage at the entry to our city on the Canoe side. Is that something that we expect to get done in 2019?
Your Worship, the work to remove the signage has already been complete.
Okay.
The reason we've carried forward this is to come up with a design for the new signage in the front. So we don't know what sort of direction we'll get from council on this, but we would like to do something, and we have 27,000 to do it.
Okay, now the 27,000, is that enough for design and to put the sign up?
It could very well be, depending on what you would like.
Okay, this is a project dear to me that I would really like to see us get done in 2019, so I'm glad to see the budget money there. The playground, Klahani Playground monies, I'm wondering if a portion of those monies could come from the Park Development Reserve Fund rather than all of it from general revenue. And I'd ask the Chief Financial Officer that.
He wants to know if it can come from the Parks Development Reserve Fund. For equipment. He wants to know if the Klahani Playground can be funded from the Parks Reserve Fund. I think so. I don't know. Sorry, Your Worship. The CAO thinks that it can. I haven't reviewed the bylaw specifically to confirm that myself.
Okay. Well, I would make a motion that half of that money, $45,000, come from the Park Development Reserve Fund for the Klahani Park Playground. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Wallace Richmond. And I was just speaking to it, I would say playgrounds are expensive. And to finance 100% of it through general revenue, it's like a 0.5% tax increase for that playground alone. So I think it's something that's going to be used over time, and it would be fair to finance some of it from reserve. Speaking to that motion, I'm not sure if the people up here would like to speak to that motion. Councillor Lindgren?
Not sure who the seconder was, Your Worship.
Councillor Wallace Richmond, sorry. Councillor Eliason, did you want to speak to that motion?
Yeah.
Okay, and Councillor Flynn, did you want to speak to that motion?
In a sense, yeah.
Okay, so Councillor Lindgren, I'm gonna come back to you in a minute. Councillor Eliason.
I think we can put this playground on hold for a year. And I think we know that we can fund it in 2020. And I think that the $90,000 worth of savings is one that we can do this year. So I would suggest that we respectfully vote against your motion, and then following that motion, I'd make a motion to remove that playground entirely this year. And I mean, we're going to do a dog park there anyway, so.
Okay, well, that would be one time I would vote against my own motion, but we'll see how other councillors feel. Councillor Flynn.
I was going to make the same motion Councillor Eliason talked about. I think in a budget year like this, as much as it would be nice for Klahani Park to have a playground, they've got pickleball courts, they're going to have a dog park, there's money being spent on the backstops, and in my opinion, we just helped with very little funding to build a playground at our mosquito park, or whatever it's called, canoe park. I'm not sure why we wouldn't want to see some contribution from user groups. So does it have to be done this year, and why? Oh, Rob's got his hand up. I'm sure he's got a reason to shoot me down.
Okay, let's hear from the Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Your Worship, thank you. If I could just add some clarification. So this particular park was identified by Municipal Insurance Association as a risk because it doesn't meet any standards. And it also doesn't meet the Canadian Standards Association for parks. So it's on our liability risk list. So it is one that we have a lot of parks that we have to replace, but this is one that's high priority for us. So I would highly recommend that it stay in the budget.
Okay. Councillor Flynn, did you want to respond to that, or?
Can it be fully paid for out of the Parks Development Reserve?
That's a fair question. Chief Financial Officer?
Yes, there's sufficient funds in the account.
Okay, thank you.
And my other question would be, how much would it cost to remove the liability and fix it in the future?
I don't have an answer for that, but I think it would be politically unwise to remove a play park from a park and not replace it with something.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was merely going to ask that through you to the Director of Development, given the number of projects that are carried forward and you want to catch up on all that, my question was, would there be time for this park? But then I would agree that, given the Jackson Park experience, if you're going to take the playground out, you have to have a plan to put it back before you take it out. So it's either all or nothing, in my view.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Councillor Wallace-Richmond. Would the seconder accept a friendly amendment to fund the 90,000, the whole 90,000 from the Park Development Reserve Fund? All right, I would accept that as a friendly amendment. So the motion is to move the funding for the Klahani Park Playground from general revenues to the Park Development Reserve Fund. Is there any further discussion on it? All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Councillor Eliason. Motion passes. I have two other questions. Pickleball courts, we talked about pickleball courts. Is there any long-term plan to add pickleball courts at Klahani Park?
We had it in the budget, but it got cut initially.
Okay. What is the cost of 2 more pickleball courts there?
I would think in the $15,000 range. 18, say 20. If it
All
happens
right.
next year.
I'll have that on my list for next year. And the only other small note I had is, actually, I can deal with that in special referrals. Councillor Flynn.
I'm not sure we're going to get confirmation that we can fund that 90,000 from the Parks Reserve, correct?
Yes, I can confirm that.
Okay, if we can, is there any desire to put a little bit back into that reserve? I'm not gonna make a motion unless I see anybody saying. It's a fairly significant reserve, it's got 500,000 in it, so we're taking 90, so I think it was 500.
I don't see any motion forthcoming.
Okay, and I don't see any support for a motion forthcoming, so.
Okay. Any other discussion around parks? Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on the map we had of the future development of Blackburn Park and the area where the dirt is piled now being set aside for a soccer field in the future because the school district has indicated that they may get rid of the property that they have there. And I sit on the partnership table group at the school district, and that conversation has actually been that they foresee in the not so distant future that we'll need an elementary school downtown, and that will be the site where they will build it, which means that it'll come with playground slash soccer field type space where little kids could still play. So I think we should keep that in mind.
That's good information. Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. Councillor Cannon.
I actually wanted to go back to the Klahani Park one again.
Yeah, that would be fine. You can go back.
So it's a liability, that's why we're putting a park in there. And what would be the cost, like, it's been a long time since I've been out there actually, but what would be the cost to get rid of the liability? Would we have even a ballpark on that, or?
Well, it would be removing the entire play structure that's there now.
And
all of
is
the
there
equipment.
quite a big play structure that's existing? It must be one of the metal ones, right, like old?
I'll get Jason to answer that question because I'm not sure exactly what's there. So.
Jason, I'm very glad to see we've got you out of your chair and to the microphone. I've been trying. But welcome. It's nice to have you here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, so the Klahani Playground is a wooden structure. It was built about 38 years ago. It's rotting. We had the carpenter do an assessment on the wood. We've also drilled into the wood. The innards have rotten, and it's extremely unsafe. It doesn't meet any of the fall height requirements, which needs to be done. The base is not properly supported, so, you know, it doesn't drain, et cetera, et cetera. It's a maintenance nightmare, and we've had just in the last, I have 4 documented cases of injury at that playground. If you see the slide is very dangerous. The kids tumble off it near the corner, and yeah. So, any other questions I can help with?
So is that park utilized, just a question, is it utilized by, like there's ball diamonds there, right? Still?
Yeah. So, if I may just go back a little bit, Kalani Park was essentially deserted 3 years ago. Then we did a lot of maintenance out there, and now I will say it's probably almost one of our busiest parks in the community. And so now, especially since we did the turf location in between the ball diamonds and the pickleball courts, a lot of families are picnicking out there, and that's why we just did trees and tables and everything else. And now the playground sits adjacent to all that, and that's where we're having the most young families in our parks right now.
Okay. And doing a play structure is kind of the way that we're going with our parks. Has anything else been looked at, like just having an area on the turf where they could, play with balls or whatever, like not necessarily a structure? Has that been looked at?
No.
No? It's always the go-to is a play structure?
Well, in addition, that's why we made and that's why we designed the tables and the trees exactly how they are, is to have that big open space for everybody, for young families to play even warm-up ball, any type of activity they want. Then also we're designating that zone for an actual playground, a proper up to standard playground that we don't really have to maintain. We just have to do our monthly inspections on it.
Okay, and there is a plan and costing of what you have in mind?
There's 3 different options, option A, B, and C, and it was submitted at the time of budget for that.
And 90,000 is the cost of that?
Yes.
Okay, and I guess my other question is, will this be done this year?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind you guys that South Canoe School opened in September, and they have about 107 students there and no play structure at the school grounds at all. And so this is the go-to playground for the South Canoe School kids. And so I think in addition to the number of people that are using it now, it will become a day use for kindergarten to grade 6 or next year maybe grade 7 students. So I think it's going to see a significant increase in its usage.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Yeah, not budget related. I mean, maybe because of postage, but if there were an opportunity to let the neighborhood know that the old park is coming out and the new park is going in, I think that would add a lot of value to the improvement.
Thank you,
Better
Councillor
nip
Wallace
it in the
Richmond.
bud, yeah.
Agreed. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I initially was against the expenditure on this after hearing about the insurance liability, the age of the facility. The Klahani Park Master Plan included a new playground, and we spent significant money on all that planning. And the fact that we can take it out of, I hope we can take it out of Parks Reserve budget, I've changed my thought process. I agree with the school there, but these diamonds are being used way more. The dog park is being used way more, and the significant use of the pickleball courts, although it would have to be people taking their grandchildren to have anybody wanting to use the playground. But all that being said, I think it's a good utilization of those reserve dollars, and I will support it if it can come from reserve. I'd revisit it if it can't.
Fair enough. So the motion is to fund the playground from reserve. Did we vote on that one already?
No.
Okay. Any other input before we vote?
Oh, sorry. Yes, carried with Councillor Eliason opposed.
Got it. Thank you. Okay.
To fund 90,000.
Yes. Let's move forward then. I see no other comments around parks. Give council a last chance if they want to have any more questions. Okay. We are moving forward. Oh, Councillor Cannon. Go ahead.
On and then I was off. I was just curious if we could maybe because what I was hearing from Councillor Lindgren is that the school district at South Canoe now is using that park a lot. Maybe there would be opportunity for a shared agreement, maybe with some dollars from the school district. Because if South Canoe doesn't have a park, perhaps that's something that we could investigate.
You know, I think that's certainly a thought that crossed my mind. The timeline is not that great for it, but I think approaching the school and the PAC there might be a possibility of some type of contribution.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay, let's move forward then to the wharf. Chief Financial Officer.
Your worship, the wharf budget reflects regular operations overall with just a nominal decrease. I will note that included in the capital expenditures are the boat dock repairs that were requested through specific referrals being funded from the wharf reserve.
Thank you. Does the Director of Engineering like to add to that at all?
If I could, just a small comment about the boat dock repair. That is for the Dragon Boat dock, and that would be a replacement and not a repair, so to speak. It would be actually replacing the large floating dock because it's become unrepairable at this point. And the other capital item, the Canoe Wharf, the old Federal Wharf, it sustained some damage during the flooding, and we have $15,000 allocated for the repairs of that structure.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Councillor Flynn?
Well, first of all, thanks to staff for putting that repair of the dock or replacement of the dock into the budget and finding it in a reserve. Appreciate that. And let's just be thankful we're not White Rock having to replace their wharf. So I did want to know if the users of the Dragon Boat dock as a club pay anything, or do they use it for free? Looking at the revenue side of the equation, I know I'm part of that 40,000 rentals for my boat, but
I'll refer that to staff. I don't know the answer to that question.
The Dragon Boat Society doesn't pay any contribution towards that, no.
And do we have an agreement with them for use that protects us liability-wise? And
I believe we do. No liability agreement.
okay, so I would think that, I mean, I don't have a problem with them paying $1 a year to use that. We do that with all kinds of organizations, but I would hope that we get the proper liability insurance in place dealing with seniors around water and on a dock and all that. But I support the expenditure and really appreciate you found it in a reserve.
Councillor Cannon.
I was hanging out with those seniors, not that I am a senior, and I know that we all individually with our registration had liability insurance to cover us. And I know on the team that I paddle with, one of the gals is like 92, and I was really worried about the dock because we had spray painted in bright blue and red the different boards that, you know, would come up if you stepped on them. So I think this is really important that we're replacing this dock. And I also wanted to touch on, if we're going to look ahead in the future to the senior games, we're going to need our dock to be in good shape to host when we host those games, hopefully, in the future.
Great, thank you, Councillor Cannon. Thanks for thinking ahead as well. Councillor Lavery.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Harrison. Just a question, actually. Did we collapse wharf dredging into the general wharf reserve?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought after looking around for it for a while. I defer. It's not a budget discussion, but I think the discussion on dredging is something that we need to look at as well in a retreat as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Thank you. So when we look at the reserve line, wharf/float major maintenance, which has 1.2 million, The 50,000 for the dock, that's under the capital expenditure, 65,000 in brackets, is it? Is that what I'm looking at?
On this, sorry, are you looking at this?
I just wanna make sure I identify exactly where the 50,000 is coming from. And I'm looking at, reserve funds, wharf/float major maintenance. And it says 65,000 for capital expenditure. Is that the 50,000 we're talking about?
Yes, it's included in there, as well as the Canoe Wharf Federal Dock capital expenditure.
Perfect, okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion about the wharf? Okay, hearing none, we're going to, before we do sewer water, we're gonna go back to general revenue, as requested by the Chief Financial Officer. So if you turn back your binders to General Revenue Fund, so that's page 1. And we'll have the Chief Financial Officer speak to us and then allow you questions that you need to ask.
Your worship, just on a very broad basis, the taxation revenue, as discussed earlier, reflects a 4.88% tax increase and 2% for new growth. Solid waste and recycling function reflects an increase in revenue as well as costs, specifically revenue-wise due to the food waste opt-in service and replacement bins. Overall, the function is anticipated to operate in a deficit in 2019 as a result of food waste tipping fees, user education, advertising, and promotion. This deficit has been mitigated by a transfer from the reserve, which the monies were intended for such a purpose. The 2019 budget also anticipates a decrease in taxation penalty revenues as more property owners are making use of the property tax deferment program. In addition, it includes an allocation of $10,000 for interest on prepaid property taxes, which once interest rates rise past a certain level, we are required to pay those individuals who prepay their property taxes interest on those deposits. Other items to note include increased transfers to reserve, one for being set up this year for the Shuswap Memorial Arena major maintenance anticipated costs, and an increase to the law courts transfer, as well as an eliminated transfer from the future expenditure reserve, which was brought in 2018 to help mitigate the overall tax increase.
Thank you very much. So I'll open it up to councillors if they have any questions under this tab. Okay, I don't see any councillors identifying to speak. There's a couple of small items that I had. Councillor Flynn, you do? I'll let you go first.
Okay, so just to be clear, the real property taxes going up by 1.195, that's based on the original budget proposal of 4.88.
That's correct.
So that's building in that tax increase and growth and all of that.
That's correct.
Okay, so that could change, but we've cut expenditures if it does change.
Yes.
Could be higher too, depending on how specific referrals go. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Harrison. I just have a couple of quick questions on page 16. I'd have some more general comments after.
Okay, thank you. Page 16.
I notice on other grants, and I'm not sure if it's a request or a proposal, but we're decreasing the scholarship for SAS by $500. Has that been a staff proposal, or has that been done in conjunction with the high school?
So every year, council has allocated $500. Last year was unusual. The recipient had some extenuating circumstances and actually advised us that they wouldn't be applying that year and asked if we could carry forward that. She has since come forward again this last year and proven her enrollment, and so we've paid that grant. So that was just a carry forward. The budget's back down to reflect our annual.
Okay. So it's not a cutback, it's just to deal with the transitions part. Thank you very much for that. And then the other one, and maybe it's the same with New Year's Baby here too. I always like the announcement of the New Year's Baby. Have we cut back the $100 on that, or was that a transitional thing as well?
From my understanding, it's small. We don't usually budget for it. We find it if we need to pay it. In this case, that's just how it's been done. We can allocate $100 to it if you prefer.
I'd make a motion that we allocate $100 to it.
Second. Councillor Lindgren? Discussion?
Not on that. Over on that page.
All those in favor? It's carried unanimously.
Thank you. And I'll save my general comments for later.
Okay, Councillor Flynn?
Well, now that we're on that page and talking about very little numbers, and it is in the specific referrals, but I've never understood why it isn't just part of being built into the budget. The next item, the $500 cleanup, community cleanup for bags and gloves, and to me, it should just be part of our annual cost. We get a significant benefit from that. It's community involvement. We support a business that does a lot of good in our community, and I think that that should just be part of the budget.
Would you like to make a motion?
I make the motion.
You'd like to add $500 to Community Cleanup Day?
Yeah.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Wallace-Richmond?
I've discussed why, and I don't think it should be a specific referral every year.
Okay, just want to make sure does staff have any comments on that item? Okay. Councillor Eliason?
Is this the DIA one?
Yes, it is.
Okay, do we want to wait for this until specific referrals? Or are we going to go through the proper process and get into parks or water and sewer and then specific referrals, Your Worship? Because I think that I would like to table, if this motion is going to come forward, I'd like to table it until the appropriate time. I've held myself back on other specific referrals and asked permission at that time, so.
Fine with waiting.
Yeah, we can do that if you wish.
I know it's not a lot of money, but this is in the contract of the Downtown Improvement Association. This is their core function.
Councillor Flynn, or Councillor Eliason, would you like to table this motion till specific referrals?
Yes, please.
Okay, motion's tabled to specific referrals. Did you want to comment on other sections of this budget?
I don't. I was just speaking against.
Okay. All right. Any other comments on this piece of the budget? Okay. I just had a couple of questions, understanding questions for me. So under revenues on page 2, transportation parcel tax. So $17,000 more this year. So I'm assuming we have about 142 more properties. Would that be a fair conclusion?
We used a percentage for a new growth factor.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay, thank you. On page 9, I didn't understand the wildfire prevention timber sales line.
Sure. Following some meetings with Mr. Lavery and a contractor, Silvatech, I believe, we've been in discussion about the wildfire prevention strategies and the grant applications that we've submitted applications under. Part of those applications, we have, I don't want to say committed, but suggested that we would use some of the revenues from clearing those areas to mitigate future costs. These estimates for the timber sales have come from the contractor. The wildfire prevention timber sales, the expenses are showing up under emergency services. The net surplus from that is being transferred to reserve. It's a new reserve fund being established called Forestry Management. Essentially, there's no impact of it on the budget, but we did want to include it at this point because it is included in our application, our grant applications.
Could you guide me to the reserve fund?
Sure. It's on the second page,
Okay,
right underneath affordable housing.
okay, forestry management, I see. So the difference is forecast to be 300,000.
Is more research still required by staff on that, though.
Okay, all right, so that's tentatively in the budget, depending on how things go. All right, thank you. The page 11, the affordable housing, 60,000, that's coming from the reserve account, the $200,000 reserve account, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. On page 21, there's a number of things about sanitation, recycling, and that kind of thing. And so part of the plastic bag bylaw, plastic bag ban in July, part of my thought is to provide families with one reusable grocery bag that would have our Salmon Arm word mark on it. And I'm wondering if that would be a budget item or if that's something that can be absorbed in another way.
It would need to be a separate item. It has not been included in the budget at this point.
Okay. Difficult to estimate the cost of that. But I would like to set aside some funds because I think it's a positive in a whole bunch of ways. One, everybody gets a reusable bag. Two, it has our word mark on it. Three, it starts the bylaw off January the 1st. So could I suggest that we include a budget line with $5,000 for 2019 to supply a reusable bag to each household in Salmon Arm? I would make that motion. Thank you, Councillor Cannon. I think I've spoken to it, so if others would like to speak, I would hear them now. Councillor Labrie would like to speak to that?
No, I think my button was still on. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Wallace-Richmond?
Different question.
Okay. Councillor Eliason?
Yeah, that seems like it would be a great thing to come from council initiatives at some point throughout the year. And maybe if we have a surplus in this year's council initiatives, which we likely will, but I'm happy if 6 one, half dozen of the other, I'm happy to fund it now or in the future. General revenue is just as good.
Okay. Let me just check with the Chief Financial Officer. How much money are we budgeting in council initiatives?
Actually, 20 grand.
25,000.
Okay, I like your suggestion, Councillor Lyson, and I know Council hasn't had a lot of time to think about this idea, and so I would withdraw my motion, and we'll bring it up closer to when we are thinking of implementing the bylaw, and we'll try to access council initiatives at that time.
And send it out with their calendars.
Sorry?
Yeah, no, that's great.
Okay, thank you. This year's budget's finished. Well, that was last year. Yeah. So this year's surplus from council initiatives has been applied to other surpluses, is that correct?
The 2018 council initiatives balance, I believe there's still monies remaining, but if they're not used at the end of the year, they're absorbed within the budget. They're not carried forward.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, that's fine. We have 25,000, so I will wait until that time. Thank you. I think that's all of my items. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. On the revenue side, the business licenses for 2019, it's estimated they'll be exactly the same as 2018. Is it fair to assume that staff is being very conservative in any increases in revenue? Same rent from the neighbors, yeah.
Your worship, I believe we provided a bit of an analysis recently to council on this. The revenues have been quite consistent for a number of years.
Okay. And then on the expense side, we see all the grants or the fee for services. I just wondered where EDS was outside of Innovation Center and Makerspace. I can't find it.
Page 23, under Economic Development Services.
Okay. And so, 23, okay, thank you very much. So our business licenses basically cover economic development. And then the next general comment I had is, so it's almost $40 million operation, of which 11 million we collect on behalf of other governments. Would that be a fair? Yes? Okay, all right, impressive, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace-Richmond, and appreciate your comment on business licenses, and we can certainly think about that for next year as well. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Harrison. Page 34. And a general comment, and we all know it at this table, but just again, I always feel the need to know it in terms of total taxes to other governments, almost $11 million. It will be on tax bills going out. We are just the collector. That is not a salmon arm tax. I know we all emphasize that, but I want to point that out. And specifically, just up one or two lines, Okanagan Regional Library has gone up $45,000. And it's just a quick, I'll talk further about it at another point. But it's an example of, they have used the BC estimate of population, which is at 19,660, to generate this, because this is the factors in between the federal census. These estimates are what's used, and so we're starting to see that estimate, provincial estimate, starting to work its way into budgeting and financing as it comes to our table. So the combination of increased assessment and increased population relative to other communities has been the major factor between that $45,000 increase. The tax increase is about the same as it's been year in, year out. And again, I'll just make a comment, we'll talk about it later on. Ironically, that kind of helps us with the FAMA allocation of being over-serviced and under-serviced, but that's a topic for another time.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for the clarification on the library.
My second general comment would be, and the Chief Financial Officer covered it finally, amazingly well, but this issue of forestry reserves, expenses and revenue is just a stab at putting it out there. We're going to find out more about this, I think, at January 14th council session. Most of it is related to the potential of the larger Forest Enhancement Service application, which could be significant money coming in, which will lead to timber that could be marketable. And we'll hear much more about that down the line. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, and thank you to Councillor Wallace-Richmond for the questions about business license and economic development and tourism. And I was the one who asked for about a 10-year summary of business license revenues, and it was provided to everybody, and it didn't change a lot. But what's interesting is the transportation parcel tax was originally designed to cover asphaltic overlays, and as the Director of Engineering and Public Works will tell us, it falls well short of that, and we're going to review that. I think it may be time to review the business license fees that haven't been changed in probably 10 years. And when the original intent of the last review, when I was at this table, was to have them try to cover a significant portion of EDS and economic development, which are tourism related and business services. And now the shortfall is about $130,000 from revenue to expenses as we've put more money towards EDS and chamber. And I'm not saying I support businesses only covering that cost, but I do think we need to revisit our business license fees or discuss that as part of our retreat, that's all. So,
Councillor Flynn. Is there any other comments from councillors under General Revenue Fund? Okay, I do not see any. There is one sheet that talks about capital budget. I think we've talked about most of those. Did the Chief Financial Officer want to say anything about the capital budget?
Your Worship, these are mostly carry forward. New this year is the roll gate for the City Hall customer service desk. Needs to be replaced. Otherwise, nothing specific to note.
Okay. Council, do you have any questions? I think we've reviewed most of these items. Okay, I don't see any questions there. So we will move now to getting close to the back of our binder, to Water Fund. Chief Financial Officer, we do Water Fund, Sewer Fund, then specific referrals? Okay. We can do this. I think we can do this. So let's talk about the Water Fund first.
Sure, Your Worship, I'll just clarify, I have confirmed with the Parks bylaw, and it does include the ability to purchase playground equipment, so that transfer is fine.
Great, thank you very much for the clarification.
The Water Fund reflects a net increase of $142,500. In November, Council approved a 1.5% increase to water user fees. This has resulted in approximately $36,500 in new revenue. There's an increase in water supply revenue of approximately $64,000 as a result of the city installing meters into many of its parks. In 2019, the budget also reflects anticipated revenue of $10,000 under the Infrastructure Planning Grant, for which an application will be made to complete a secondary water supply assessment, anticipated to cost $30,000. The capital budget funded from revenue is consistent with prior years. As discussed in my memo, there are a number of large and costly capital projects on the horizon. As a result, the budget reflects several transfers to reserves as a starting point to aid in funding at a minimum a portion of these projects. Thank you.
Thank you. And the water and sewer utility must balance within themselves, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Any questions under the water utility? Okay, I do not see any questions there. Let's go to the sewer fund.
The sewer fund reflects a net increase of $105,780. Again, in November, Council approved a 1.5% tax increase, or sorry, user fee increase for this, resulting in approximately $32,000 in new revenue. Operational expenditures to note include the addition of fiber optic communications at the wastewater control center for $10,000 and increasing hydro costs of $10,000. The capital budget funded from revenue is slightly less than previous years. However, further to my memo, in anticipation of several large future capital expenditures, $161,600 has been transferred to reserve.
Great, thank you. Any questions around the sewer utility? I see none. So we will move to specific referrals. The way we'll do specific referrals is I'll introduce a referral. If someone wishes to speak to it or make a motion, then we'll discuss it. If there's no discussion of the item, I'll go on to the next item. So we'll start with Salmon Arm Fall Fair, one chuck wagon sponsorship, $1,000. Would anyone like to speak to that item? Seeing none, we'll go on to B, Seniors Fifth Avenue Activity Center Association, installation of indented parking along Fifth Avenue Southeast. No estimate available at this time and no budget allocated. Councillor Flynn.
thank you, and I'm not going to make a motion to bring this forward, but when I saw the presentation and the plan for the parking at an angle in that boulevard that I think is not necessarily the most efficient use of our property or theirs, I thought that it made a lot of sense. There is huge parking issues there. I'm not sure that the 12 or 15 or 18 spots that would be opened up by that would make a huge difference to the pressures, but it would improve it. But I would suggest that maybe staff can look at that and think about it for next budget as an option. I don't think this is the year to try to do it or even consider it. Thoughts?
Director of Engineering and Public Works, do you want to comment on that?
If I could, I've got some photos here. The issue we have with the angle parking is twofold. One, we have, when we see the pictures, you'll see there's a lot of utilities along that boulevard. So even indenting the parking, you're not going to gain anything. You'll actually lose parking. So even though there's a large boulevard area there, it really does not bode well to increased on-street parking. The only alternative is for them to find some additional parking for their use.
Okay.
Thank you, and thanks for having that photo up there. Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. I remember from the presentation that I don't think it was strictly about increasing the number of parking spaces they had, but to reduce the danger of seniors stepping out of their cars into oncoming traffic in the dark. And putting them on parallel parking meant that they were standing between cars in a safe zone. So just want to keep that in mind.
And Your Worship, we have already dealt with that issue. We've actually restricted all the parking on the north side of the street. So all we have to do now is relocate the center line, because it's an issue. The street is wide enough for the single lane parking, and without the lane to the north, it should be dealt with.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks, Councillor Lindgren. First of all, Councillor Flynn, your election sign is still up there.
No, it's not.
But yeah, I do appreciate Councillor Lindgren's comment there, and it's clear in this photo, the second photo. So just to understand, so we've painted yellow line on the opposite side of the road to have no parking there, and we're going to move the center line over. Is that correct?
That's correct. It'll give at least the drivers some idea of where they should be driving. Right now, everybody's straddling the yellow line, the center line. One of the other improvements that we're looking at that's going to be addressed by traffic safety is actually the crosswalk, and that was one that we had a request for lighting or crossing lights.
Okay, thank you, because it was more about safety than about the few parking spots. All right. We'll move forward then to, is everybody finished with that item? Okay, we'll move forward then to item C, Jerry, Emil, and Betty Welsh, installation of sidewalk curb and gutter along 10th Street Southwest between 10th Street Southwest and Foothills Road. Note, confirmation of adequate road dedication required. It's a $145,000 item. Councillor Eliason.
Yeah, I think that this is a project that we should start looking at for a reserve account, and I think we should start looking at it for a reserve account in next year's budget, because it's a pretty big project. Also, I think that where the lead is delineated, the red is delineated. I think there's an alternate route along 20th behind where the gray is up to their houses. So I think that our first step would, yeah, right there. There's a route there that goes through. So I think next year we could start a reserve for the first part of the red, just to get to the corner of 10th and 20th. Exactly. But I'm not prepared to support it this year, but Jerry's been after us for 10 years on this one. So reserve account next year.
Thank you. Other discussion on this item? I'd just like to say, I think, Councillor Eliason, you're dead right there. I would agree to look at it next year. Do we have the road right away on that section there below 20th?
So, Your Worship, we have potentially sufficient dedication to put the sidewalk across. We don't actually have full road dedication on these two properties.
Okay, so
we could potentially get a sidewalk through there, but we would have to do a design to actually confirm that.
Thank you. And how about if we kept going up the street from 20th to Foothill, what about the dedication there?
We have full dedication along that corridor.
Okay. All right, so I think Councillor Eliason's goal of putting some money away next year in a reserve may be a good one. The estimate of 145,000, was that to take the sidewalk all the way up to Foothill?
Just check that was the two phases combined.
Okay.
So that's essentially phase 1 and phase 2.
Okay, so it might be helpful to have the phase 1 amount for next year's budget as an estimate. Thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Just related to that, those two, where phase 1 is, I'm not sure, is that agricultural land on the, where those homes are? Or is there ability to subdivide with panhandle lots and infill there?
These are actually not in the LR. They're actually in the urban containment boundary. You're
So
speaking
they're-
of these large lots here?
So the option could be to wait it out too.
Yep.
For development potential there and do it where there's no development potential. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no motion on that this year, we'll move ahead to D, Lori and Mike DeFelice, installation of ditch alongside of 11th Street Southeast. Councillor Lavery.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Harrison. I was just looking at in the letter, have we done any ditch work along there?
Your Worship, we have not done any ditch work as of yet. It's actually in a riparian area, so we need to go through the proper approval processes in order to do anything. There was actually a development slated for that location as well, so we're kind of waiting to see what's happening.
I'm kind of familiar with this street and also the lane around in the back, which is another request as well. A question through you, Your Worship, to staff. So are we saying that riparian, I know riparian implications prior to getting to the ditch, and then there's the ditch over to Okanagan. Does riparian extend to where it comes out to
Your
the
Worship,
Okanagan?
the ditch on the roadway is actually, we have to go through proper approvals for that to ditch it. We have that scenario in a lot of our locations in the city with our ditching. We need to get Ministry of Environment approval.
And do we have a sense of whether that is achievable, getting that approval?
It is achievable. It's just it's a tight time frame, a tight window. This particular storm, there was a lot of places around town that got flooded because of the intensity of the storm. And so this wasn't unusual. It was an unusual storm, but it wasn't unexpected, let's put it that way, for the result.
So I must, Your Worship, my sensitivity to some of these drainage issues has been there for a long time, but it's heightened. I'd like to see us proceed with this. I have no idea whether there's support for that, but I would put a motion forward to proceed with the $5,000 for ditching.
Seconder to that motion? Councillor Lindgren? Speaking to the motion. Councillor Lavery, did you want to further?
No, I think I've said it. I have gone down here a number of times. I recognize in mid-September there was sudden events and things like that, but I think it is a problem along here, and I think that we should make some attempt to try to mitigate it.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn, did you want to speak to this?
I guess I just wanted to confirm that estimate and have that, I mean, I know you can't tell us that it wouldn't flood like that in that kind of a rain event, even with the ditching. But that estimate seems really good, and based on $5,000, if we can improve that area, because I think there's two issues there. One is the water coming down from that open lot that's got the riparian area, because I've seen a ton of fish in there. And then there's the water that comes across Okanagan and comes down there as well. So I think that's, when we have our storm events, I find that that part of Okanagan washes as much as anything. And I think it does go that direction. So I will support your motion.
Thank you. Other speakers on this item? Councillor Eliason.
Yeah, I would support this item if staff had brought it forward as a priority project for them. But if we're talking about a ditching concern or a drainage concern, while it's specific to these people, staff didn't find it in their priority list, and I think that if we gave staff the $5,000 for a drainage project, this might not top the list. And so rather than picking and choosing who we think, because they wrote letters of special drainage request, I would ask staff if there are projects that would go higher than this one on that list. And so for that reason alone, I would say we'd be better off spent by trusting our professionals with their priorities than a single letter writer. No offense to the letter writers in this, but it's not for the greater good of the community, and that's my reasoning for saying no, because staff has said so many times that they've cut their budgets and cut their budgets on other things. So maybe staff can comment on it if it is a top priority of theirs.
Okay, I'll direct that to staff. Director of Engineering Public Works.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate your comments, Councillor Lyson. Those are very good. This would be a project that we would consider doing to alleviate one of the problems. Although there are many others around the community, this is one that is potentially reoccurring. We can't do anything, going back to Councillor Lavery's comments, Councillor Flynn, we can't do anything about the work on the private property, but we can definitely improve our ditching, so.
Okay, and I see our engineer in the audience has, Jen would like to make a comment if that would be okay with Director of Engineering.
Your Worship, sorry, and this is something that Mr. Nguyen doesn't need to know at this point because we're working on the drainage master plan. And one of the improvements that they have identified so far is that the inlet in this location is undersized. So it would be my recommendation to wait until we have that information, because the two projects should be done at the same time under the same permits, rather than putting one forth ahead of time.
Okay. It's very good information for us to know. And when would the timing be, do you think?
We're expecting to have the report in the spring, but as far as for budgeting purposes, because I wouldn't be able to guess on replacing the inlet, we would probably be putting forth recommendations in the 2020 budget based on the priorities from that master plan.
Okay, that's helpful for us to know. Councillor Lassen, did you want to comment further? Then I'll let Councillor Flynn, and I'll see if Councillor Lavery would like to reconsider his motion or not.
I think we can save $5,000 this year by saying we're looking at a more wholesome approach rather than just doing the ditch, and say in 2020 that we'll be addressing it because we'll have a proper prioritized master plan. I just think it makes better sense to do it right the first time.
Okay, Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, thank you. In light of that information, I am not withdrawing my support, and I do take issue with Councillor Lyson's specific referrals and specific requests are exactly that, specific by people, and they shouldn't be determined. We need to decide on them individually, but I will not support this now, knowing that there's a report coming forward, and I have no problem saying to the taxpayer we're doing a more thorough review and we're going to look at it in 2020.
Councillor Lavery, would you be interested in delaying your motion, or do you want to move forward?
No, I think that's critical information.
Just press your button.
Been pressing my buttons all day. No, I think it's critical information. Thank you, Jen, for providing that, and I think staff would have the direction to combine these two ideas as we go forward, and hopefully we could. I think we through you, Your Worship, do we inform all specific referral letters about the result, that we just reflect that in the communication back to their application?
Okay, let's just check and make sure. I'm sure that we do, but can I ask the Chief Financial Officer?
Yes, we send letters to everyone.
Okay, and you would like, it makes sense to reflect the discussion here on this item?
Yeah, thank you. So I would withdraw that.
Okay, thank you. Who is the seconder of that?
I was.
And you're happy with withdrawal? Okay, thank you. Councillor Lyson, did you want to comment further?
Yeah, and I appreciate not to get off topic, but there's a few specific referrals for drainage coming up. And the biggest infrastructure challenge that is going to be facing local government in the next 20 years is adequate stormwater management. And so when they come forward with the plan, we have to take it seriously, because if we received a letter from Mr. Piska this morning, we've got specific referral letters, on and on and on. So this is an issue that we're going to have to review and we're gonna have to take action on. So we're starting to see some of the festering of it come to us, but longer term, this is a big deal for us.
Yep, I agree, and I think this table recognizes that with climate change and difference in precipitation and volumes, it certainly is going to be an issue for all cities. Okay, we'll go to E. Tech Creek Processors Limited, installation of sanitary sewer service along 13th Avenue Southwest, Industrial Park, $425,000 request. It is not budgeted for presently. Would anyone like to speak to that item? Seeing none, we'll move to F. Patrick Webb, road surface improvements, 45th Avenue Northeast. Cost is $118,000. It is not budgeted for at this time. And thanks very much to staff for following along with the maps. It's helpful. Anyone like to speak to this? Councillor Eliason?
Yeah, the request is for a full asphaltic overlay. In the past, we've been able to use millings from roads on there and temporarily fix the problem. Is it possible to upgrade with some more milling in the spare time? I have no interest in paving this road.
Okay, so thank you for your question. I'll direct it to the Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Your worship, we think that this road is, we have, again, as Councillor Eliason has mentioned, we have put millings on this. Right now, all it needs is some grading and some repacking. It's very difficult to pave rural roads. They added to our inventory, and we did say that when further development happened along 20th, that we reconsider looking at this for dust control. But I think we've mitigated quite a bit of the dust in this area by using millings. But it may, at some point in the future, when Leighton and subdivision and Gary Arsenal subdivision and all those properties along 20th develop, that we may end up having to pave this in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, and I agree, perhaps not the time now, but the millings, I drove the road the other day, and it's certainly upgraded from gravel. I appreciate Mr. Webb's letter, though. We'll move to H. Nyland, improvements to 60th Street Northwest in Glen Eden. There's approximately $72,500 in contributions to future works that could be utilized for this project. So our cost would be $24,000. There is no money budgeted at this time. Comments on that item? Councillor Flynn?
Can I just get an explanation on that? So previous development has paid DCCs specifically towards improving that road, and my math is it's 22.5 that we would have to commit to make it happen. Is that correct?
Over to staff, Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Your worship, there has been contributions, cash contributions put forward for this. This particular property and Mr. Nyland's property have given contributions, as noted in the comments. There's some issues with the height of the road and the approaches, and I think that's what Mr. Nyland would like to see repaired, and using his contribution to do that. But it's quite a large frontage, so at some point we could entertain doing this, but we definitely will be adding money to it. So,
thank you. Any follow-up, Councillor Flynn?
No, I'm thinking it might be something for a future budget.
Okay, Councillor Eliason?
Yeah, would this be eligible under, if, let's just say, our parcel tax changed, would this be something that we could partake under the asphaltic overlays program? In the future?
Your worship, this isn't currently an asphaltic road.
Oh,
what we would know, it's a gravel road. What we could potentially do is use RAP on this road, so use reclaimed asphalt. Okay. It won't be bringing it up to the rural road standard, which is actually, or sorry, which is the rural road standard, which is asphalt paved. But it is an improvement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And if you haven't driven this road, I suggest you do. It's not a well-traveled road because there's an alternative around it. So for the people who live right alongside there, I understand the request, but I would not describe it as a heavily used road in our city. Okay, H, Hans Joost, road and drainage improvements at 9th Street Southeast and Old Auto Road. $20,000 request. It is not budgeted for. Any counselor like to comment on this one? Seeing none, we'll go to I, Georgette Clayton. Installation of sidewalk fronting 651 2nd Avenue Southeast by Mount Ida Muse, $10,000. It's not budgeted for at this time. Anyone like to comment on this item? Okay, I'd just like to ask staff, this one kind of stands out because, as you can see, there's sidewalk, then there's none, and then there's sidewalk, and the Claytons happen to live right in the middle. So you can see where people walk right along that lawn in front of their house. Staff has not recommended we complete that sidewalk piece. Where does it lie in the priority as far as sidewalk completion goes?
Your Worship, we really don't have a priority for this particular one. I think we might look at it potentially next year. With the development being completed this year, we can see how it works. We've done quite a bit of improvement on this street with sewer and water, asphalt overlay, curbing. Again, I'm not even sure if we have dedication along here, to be specific.
Okay, is it possible for next year's budget just to find that piece out?
Yeah.
And invite councillors to make sure they take a look at it. I'm sure they have already, but I would be interested in looking at it for next year's budget. Okay, Canon Law Whitehood, J, road and drainage improvements at 9th Street Southeast and 20th Avenue Southeast. It's an $8,000 item. It's up at the top of Hillcrest. Any comments on this item? Okay, hearing none. Item K, Andrew Sherritt Limited, Road and Drainage Improvements at 2690 13th Avenue Southwest Industrial Park. To note, the requester has said he would cost share 50%. Replacement of the bricks there, $24,000 item. It's not budgeted for at this time. Any comments on this item? Councillor Flynn?
Just a question maybe to Jen again. Are these specifically in that drainage plan discussion that you're talking about? All of these different spots?
So we'll turn it over to Director of Engineering and Public Works, and he can refer to the engineer if you would like.
Your Worship, this is actually to repair. I don't have a photo of it here. I apologize. So in front of Andrew Sherritt along 13th, they have brick pavers, and the brick pavers extend from the edge of their property into the roadway. And they were placed not by the city, but they were placed by whoever developed that building. And the brick pavers are now undulating, they're failing. And we were approached by Andrew Sherritt from a safety perspective of if we wanted to cost share with them to replace the brick or remove the brick and pave it. So I said, well, the only way, it's not on our priority list, we didn't put them there. If you would like to try and pursue this, you could do it through a specific referral. So they're asking for a cost share, and I believe that we had a cost. Let's see the cost in here. Yeah, it was $24,000. So they're asking for a $12,000 cost share.
So is there a global good to this project? Because somebody coming forward with a cost sharing, to me, is a positive. They recognize an issue, they recognize there's a benefit to the community, and they're willing to pay for half of it, which they don't have to do. They could wait. But is there a global good?
Potentially is. It would resolve an issue. And by paving it, it would, right now there's no curb and gutter along that roadway. It's not built to our industrial park standard by any means. There's no real ditch there because they park in the ditch. So by paving it, we could actually put a nice swale and direct the water into our existing ditch along the, I think it's the west side of the property. So it's definitely something to consider.
Can I ask that we wait and see where we end up with a bunch of the others, and, because if it could be built into this year, I think anytime somebody's coming forward and trying to make something better for everybody, but they're willing to contribute to it.
Sure, I'll permit you to come back to it later if you wish.
Okay.
I think Councillor Lavery would like to speak to it presently, if you're comfortable with that.
Yep.
Okay, Councillor Lavery?
No, actually, my questions were answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My only comments on it are, it's a bit like, I like the cost share too, but it's a bit like improving the parking lot for Andrew Sherritt. I like that store, and I park there a lot. And so, but you're parking on the bricks, because the parking lot and the road frontage are kind of the same thing.
Okay.
You kind of have to go and check it out to see what it's exactly like.
Because is that a place where you buy handyman stuff?
It's down by Tech Creek. No, it's where you buy, well, yeah, it is.
Okay, that's why I don't know it. Okay. Yeah, Kathy's probably been there. And I will step out for the next one.
Okay, item L is Claire Askew. We had a presentation by Ms. Askew, and you've all seen her specific referral. So I'll open it up to any discussion that councillors might have. Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. Of all the referrals, I have to say this is the one I think that has some pretty significant potential for, not for Askews, but for the downtown as a whole. And when I spoke about opportunity cost of not doing things, this is the one I was, this is the one I had in mind. So my question to staff, so here are my thoughts. I don't think as a city we've done a very good job of the public patio piece. We've not made it easy for businesses to take over a couple parking spots and have a summer patio. This is my view, all right? In other communities, it's done that certain parking spots are dedicated to business patios in the summer months. It's doable, it works, and so what I would be interested in is, yes, moving the transit stop and giving Askews back their storefront, because it's an important space that they have shared with the community, and I think if they need to do this, and I believe it would be transformative for the downtown now that the Ross Street Plaza is coming. I sort of see this whole community space as becoming more vibrant and changing, and I want to see us do something. Now, the transit piece cost less than I thought it would. The planting of the trees, I assume that includes the purchasing of the trees, would also add value, but I don't know if that's a permanent thing on the new sidewalk, but really it's the sidewalk that's the most expensive part. So my question would be, would that sidewalk get used in the wintertime? Because I don't necessarily want to be spending city money building things that are only used half of the year.
Okay, we'll ask staff, Director of Engineers and Public Works.
If I could get some clarification, the new sidewalk, if it would be used in the wintertime?
Yeah.
I don't see why it wouldn't be. I'm
Well, no, I
sorry,
mean,
don't
because is it,
understand.
I think my sense of it, sorry to jump in, my sense of it was they wanted the expanded sidewalk because they want it to be outdoor space.
Okay. I can't answer that. I
So
don't know
could
if
it
they were
be
looking
a
at.
outdoor patio in the summertime? Does it have to be a permanent sidewalk? Like, is there an in-between measure here, or do we just go full
Well, Your
March?
Worship, if it's a sidewalk, it remains as a sidewalk. If they were to look at putting a patio space on, they would be required to get council approval, and that would be utilizing a roadway. So I don't know how we would facilitate that.
Okay.
The patio space would be encroaching onto the city roadway, potentially. Or I'm looking at the property lines. Maybe it is. Maybe it's on their property, and yeah, I'm just not sure where the property lines are. But it would be the patio area could potentially be on city property, and we would have to find some way of allowing that.
Okay.
Councillor Wallace Richmond, did you want to ask further?
No, those are my thoughts, but I'm happy to, I'm supportive of the project generally. The expanding of the sidewalk width came in at 80,000 about, which surprised me, but if that's what we have to spend for 2 spots, that's what we would spend, but I just wondered if there was an in-between solution or a part funding of it.
Okay, well, how about if we continue with discussion and we can always come back to your suggestion. Councillor Eliason.
Thanks. So the key to this, I think, is the moving of the bus stop, and that's the real hurdle or rock in the way. So I'd be supportive of moving the bus stop, allowing the sidewalk to be built, or the crosswalk there, proposed crosswalk. I think that could be a winner there too. It's a pretty slow street. People cross anywhere anyways, but I agree. As far as the sidewalk extension in the patio area, that half of the table wasn't around, but and Debbie was here, and Councillor Flynn was here, as I lobbied really, really hard and had staff do a ton of work to get temporary summer patios taking over parking spots in the downtown core. And so I don't think we've ever officially passed anything, but all of the temporary patio work, which I envision for the pie company, for the sushi restaurants, for anybody who wanted to do it, all of that heavy lifting is being done already by staff. So rather than spend a bunch of money and lose parking spots all year round, I'd prefer to go back to that policy that we had talked about for the temporary patio, because staff's already done all the work, move the bus stop, move the crosswalk, and then have the parking in the winter when they want it, patio in the summer when they want it, and then allow that to happen. So when you say that the street parking, does it have to be all year round? No, absolutely not. And we're not on the leading or bleeding or anywhere close to the edge on any of this. But if you're on Robson or if you're in larger centers, or you'll see the temporary parking spot patios, or patios that have pushed out to a temporary sidewalk that's moved, because nobody's sitting on that in the winter. So I'd be in favor of the sidewalk on this, or the bus stop move and the crosswalk, but I think I would also support the proponent to bring forward the temporary parking spot occupancy on that, because that's something that they get to deal with. So those are, and the trees I think we would fund as we went, because we are doing some downtown street tree replacement with that, and we could plan that into future budgets. But in the short term, I think the additional crosswalk instead of the sidewalk and the bus stop relocation are the two main hurdles, and then us working with staff and directing staff to reinvigorate the parking spot use thing. So that would be my suggestion on how we move this forward if council chooses to move it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Eliason, and I have two other speakers prior to any motion, perhaps. Councillor Lavery.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Harrison. I look forward to that motion. Actually, one of my questions was what happened at this table prior to that. I think this makes imminent sense. My general understanding of the askew's proposal was to use that expanded sidewalk as a patio area, and I think that I'm not sure if it meets their full needs, but I think it meets my sense of the needs of temporary space, and it could be the start of following through on some of the concepts we've had here before. So I would look forward to that motion and I would support it. My only comments would be, and there's no estimate on it, is on the additional crosswalk. I have to say I've heard varying opinions of the efficacy and the safety of the sidewalk, and I would, at the time it proceeded, defer to staff's recommendation about the safety and utility of it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I totally support moving the bus stop, and I'll wait for probably Councillor Eliason to make that motion. When I saw this presentation on this development, I think the patio area was more permanent. It wasn't something that would be, that they would be able to take away in the winter months. That's what, if I remember the presentation, that's what it looked like. So I don't know whether that's what they had in mind, that they would make it kind of a temporary patio, and then in the winter months it wouldn't be there. Because I think that there was some, was there kind of shelter over it or something in the?
Hold on. Right now, it's council's discussion, so it has to go through me,
Yeah.
Councilor
Yeah.
Cannon. This is not a public discussion today.
Yeah, so I don't know if others remember the presentation, but I was pretty sure it was more a permanent patio. Nope, there we go. So it's here. Yeah, and as Councillor Eliason said, I remember we worked with Director of Engineering, did a lot of the stuff with the temporary patios downtown area, so that's something that we should probably bring back so we can have a look at what that looked like. And yeah, I totally support the bus move, the bus stop, the bus shelter moving, and I think this is a great plan. But as far as committing or supporting all of that money, that specific referrals is the total here, I wouldn't do that, but yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Cannon. Councilor Eliason.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Question from you to Director of Engineering. We've already heard the cost of a crosswalk for a replacement of a stamped concrete one is $15,000. How much are the bump outs on either side?
I don't have a cost for those, and in regards to this location, I don't think staff are in favor of having a mid-block crosswalk at this location just because of the access into the parking lot here.
Okay.
This was something that was discussed, and it would have to go to traffic safety as well. And the actual relocation of the parking stalls would have to be reviewed by downtown parking at some point. I know we talked about it at downtown parking just briefly, but not in detail.
Okay.
So there's a number of steps that would have to go through first.
So the movement of the transit service and shelters, which is I think the main concern, which is sort of holding things back, would be $15,000.
We haven't confirmed these numbers, but they're coming from Gentech, so I'm assuming that they'd be accurate.
Close?
Yep.
Okay. And in my understanding, this would be the movement of the transit down the street would be is the biggest hurdle right now, limiting the ability to redevelop this site in any shape or form. I think there's a reasonable solution for a sidewalk patio, as we've discussed, and we've made progress at this table prior on, because we've been through it. So the rest would come from staff and traffic and safety at this point. But is there any sort of sense of what do you think is a reasonable budget amount to move the transit?
Well,
15?
Your Worship, if I could just provide some comment. So looking at this isn't a city plan. I would not recommend the bus stop to be located here. I would recommend it to be located here and have a bump out at this location so that the buses could freely come in and go out without having to worry about parked cars.
Okay.
All right. And so that would mean that it would be an interruption in this parking here as it's being shown here. So relocating shopping cart storage here, but we would have to interrupt parking because the parking is encroaching on the city right of way here. So we would have to work with Askews in regards to their parking here in order to erect a bus shelter. Because right now the people who are using the shelter here are actually benefiting from the awning at Askews. So we would have to put a shelter in, at least one.
Okay.
So I would say potentially $20,000. If 15 is for the relocation, I don't know if they've budgeted for a shelter in this cost estimate.
Okay. I would make a motion from general revenue to take $20,000 for the relocation of that transit stop.
Second, Councilor Cannon. Councilor Lassen, did you want to discuss that further? Or?
No, I think it's the most important first step is that relocation, and then.
Okay. Discussion on that motion. Councilor Lavery.
It's associated with the motion, and I think I need a bit more information, Your Worship. regardless of the configuration, are we still going to need some of those bump outs?
We would need a bump out at this crossing, Your Worship, in order to have the bus.
And would we likely need a bump out for a temporary patio scenario in front of the store?
If they wanted to make it a permanent patio area, like I said, the property line, my understanding is just, it's probably a foot off the edge of the building. So this would actually have to go to council at some point for approval to construct on city property.
As a separate process. Thank you very much. I will support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace Richmond?
Thanks, Your Worship. I too will support the motion. I just don't want to, I think the bump out piece would add to the budget. I feel like if we're going to commit to this pretty significant change, we should be mindful to maybe budget a little more rather than less, but it's your motion and it's been seconded, so. Would we go to 30? If 30 were a friendly amendment, okay. And it also signals to the downtown and the applicant or whatever they're not applicants in this case, that this is the beginning step of, if it were passed, I think this would be a strong signal that we're prepared to use tools at our disposal to help make this happen.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace Richmond. The bus shelter piece, do we have bus shelters budgeted in the budget somewhere else, do we not?
Yes, we do. We have, typically we try to install 2 a year. So this could be one. And there is a bus shelter included in the Gentech estimate for that 12,000.
Okay, so I would suggest that we make sure that one of the bus shelters we build is from that budget line. The other thing I'm interested in is the sidewalk bump out that says sidewalk printed on it on this plan, that piece right now, how much does that piece cost?
I'll just check the estimate to see if it's broken out. Looks like it's about 13,000.
Because to me, if we just go back to the picture, that part is critical. Because you can't put a patio on the only sidewalk that's there, because then people are going to have to walk on the road, and that will not work. And so my suggestion would be that we increase it to 35,000, knowing we're going to use a bus shelter budget line to build the bus shelter. And then we could work with Askews for location. I think director's made some good points. But I think if we feel strongly that we want to have patio area in the downtown, we have to make it feasible to have a patio area. If we don't put that sidewalk in there, I just can't see it happening. So I'm not sure, maybe I'll let Council Eliason comment on that possibility.
Well, I'm torn because in the the sidewalk I think is a great idea, but being on the downtown parking commission, I never want to lose those extra 2 spots if I don't have to for when they're not in use. What we had discussed here at this table prior was a temporary wooden patio that would take over 2 parking spots, which would be supplied by the user and taken and stored by the user, who rents and takes those 2 spots out. That's where the patio goes. The existing sidewalk right in front of the door goes into it. So in the winter, when we're doing all our snow removal and snow clearing, and nobody's sitting outside on the patio anyways, then that just goes away, and then we get those 2 spots back for the winter, and stores snow and everything goes there. So if you look at these temporary patios on the bigger picture around the world, they are made out of wood or composite. They come in for when your application comes in April, May, June, and then they go away in October. And that way you don't lose it full time. However, you still get your outside patio or terrace.
Could we just minimize this one? I don't want to lose this picture.
Oh, there they are.
Can I look at the other one behind it? Yeah, so I appreciate that, Councillor Lyson, but what happens in the summertime when you have the wooden patio where where the pink is, and I'm walking along that sidewalk, am I not going to have to step out into the...
Can you go back to the other picture there, sir? Thank you. So the sidewalk, the patio actually goes into the road.
Sorry.
Sidewalk stays where it is.
The sidewalk stays where it is.
And the patio takes over a parking.
I'll show you another. This is
think I'm starting to
Burrard
get it.
Street in Kelowna. And they actually utilize the parking areas as a temporary.
Okay,
So they have these little charrettes.
got it. So can you go back to that pink one again?
Yeah.
Okay,
So see the middle one there?
so what you were saying is that the actual patio area is going to be where it says sidewalk,
Yes.
and then you're going to walk where it says patio.
Yeah.
Well, no wonder I was confused.
Yeah, why would they build this wooden? Do you remember the eatery? Way
Okay.
back in the day? I don't know if anybody does, but I do. So see right there.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. Now, thank you for explaining that to me.
And thanks for justifying that we have actually talked about this before here.
Okay, Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. I'm really in favor of helping them get this development done. It's exciting to think that we're going to improve the downtown and we're going to open up space for people to come and hang out. And I'm wondering if that's a double-edged sword. So Tim Hortons, I think, took away all their seating outside of their place because street people were hanging out there all day long, and I guess that was a bother for customers or whatever. I was under the impression that Askew's had planned to put up some kind of fence or railing between their patio and the sidewalk so that you had to go into the store to access the patio space. And I wondered if that's what that was about, if they were trying to mitigate some of that problem. Now, if we take away their opportunity to do that, is that going to be a problem where if that patio space is open to the public without coming into the store, are all the seats just going to be taken up by street people or people who aren't buying anything? And is that a problem? Maybe it's not, but if it is, it's something we should think about.
It's a good point, thank you. Councillor Wallace-Richmond? Okay. All right, is there any further discussion? The motion is to set aside $30,000 to move the bus shelter and assist with the patio situation in front of Askew's. Councillor Eliason?
No, Your Worship. I think this is a good start. I think these are the main contributing things that we need to do. Now that you've seen the pictures of what I was talking about before, and that was initially, like I say, initially done for the pie company because they didn't have the extra side, right? And the sushi place was in the summer sit outside on the patio, right? And La Dolce, all of the places. And so we wanted to encourage this. Worst case scenario, we have a vibrant, walking, active downtown. So without spending a bunch of money, which we've been really cognizant about at this table, I think between the proposals that we had seen the pictures of, moving the transit, I think we have some steps going forward. And if it is really successful, and it is something that we want to do, and if we work with the proposer here, then I think we can come up with more in the future. But I think this is the key first step, knowing that we're committed to it and they're committed to it.
Thank you. Other comments by councillors before I call a question?
Can you just read the motion again?
Yes.
I'm lost now.
Sure. Could we have the motion called or read, please?
Sure, it was moved by Councillor Eliason, seconded by Councillor Cannon, and that council allocate $30,000 towards the transit relocation project at Askew's.
Just moving the transit.
And I think there was another thing on it.
So, Councillor Eliason, did you want to speak to that motion?
Yeah, there was another portion that we accepted as friendly, which was one of the transit shelter. The transit shelter actually built from this year's transit shelter budget, so that there was more money for bump ups.
Okay, so is it necessary to put that as part of the motion that that the bus shelter be financed from the bus shelter budget line. I know it's an understanding that we have. I think the Director of Engineering feels comfortable that the 30,000 we're allocating here would not build the bus shelter. Yes, go ahead, Director.
Your Worship, the one thing that if we relocate the bus stop, the bus hub, we may potentially be encroaching on the Askew's parking lot property in order to build a pad, because that sidewalk isn't wide enough to put a shelter on. So we do have some other issues that we have to get through.
Okay, understand. Councillor Lavery. I do have something.
Just so I'm clear, I thought we were talking about $20,000 to give us enough room to move the bus stop. We would look for a shelter out of our regular appropriations of bus shelters, and that moving it to this location would require, based on good practice, at least a bump out of some sort. And so I think that was the extra $10,000 in the conversation. So the 30 was 20 plus repurpose or reuse a shelter plus 10 for concrete for bump out.
Okay, is that the administrator's understanding of the motion as well?
Yes, it was 30,000, which was bumped up to 30,000 for that reason, and also the issue of the bus shelter being taken from the funding, the line item we have for that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Is everybody understanding the motion now? Any other comments on this motion? All those in favor? Passed unanimously, thank you. On to M. Wait for Councillor Flynn there. Councillor M is Steve Corey. Installation of a 6-meter driveway let down at 1870 Okanagan Avenue Southeast, $3,000 cost. Any discussion from council? I'd just like to ask the question. The bump down on this, for this house, can we just put the cursor where the bump down is? And I'm assuming it's there because there's a manhole cover there, is that right?
That's correct.
And so I can see why the owner of the house is wanting a different bump out, because it seems to be in an awkward spot. Do we normally do this kind of thing?
Your Worship, there is some history on this one. It appears that when this house was built, this is a very large driveway. We only allow a 6-meter crossing. And so it was placed here so that the cars could actually back out and do a 3-point turn and go out safely. This house has changed ownership, and Mr. Corey is the new owner, and he would like a crossing here. Now, we're not in favor of that anyway, because that would increase. It's either take this one out, put one over here, or leave this one where it is. So one way or the other, one of them has to go.
Okay, I understand. And I think Mr. Corey no longer owns the house. There's a new owner there. Mm-hmm. So the bump out is there because the person who built the house wanted it there.
That's correct, or at least to my understanding it is.
I see. Okay. Any other questions on this item? Okay, we'll move along then to number MC. Sue Kershaw, installation of sidewalk crossing at 50th Street Northeast, which is a canoe railway crossing. $45,000. It is not budgeted presently. Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. Referring back to a previous budget item, there weren't any improvements planned for this through CP that are being asked of us from CP Rail?
Your Worship, there was no improvements planned by CP Rail, and there's no improvements planned by the city.
Okay.
From staff. At this time.
At this time. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Flynn?
I think long-term, something's needed, but to me, this isn't the year, and I don't think we should put anything into reserve to make it the year. So I do think we need to look at this in the next 2 years, though.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Lavery?
I do think this needs to be done. I think it was a very compelling presentation. And again, there may not be support for this, but I would like to make a motion to put half of the money forward in reserve with the next half to be done next year. So the motion would read $22,500 in a reserve to complete it, hopefully in the following year.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lindgren? Speaking to the motion, Councillor Lavery?
No, I think that we were all here for the presentation and stuff like that. I think this is, again, we've got a high budget number here, but this is I think this is a very eminently logical suggestion to move forward on. And I think that we're kicking this down the road. I think we should start now.
Thank you. Councillor Eliason?
Thanks. Am I in conflict because I live on 75th?
Nope.
Then that makes me an expert on this crossing. So thank you for not saying that. There's no need to do this project. While people's opinions differ, I am of the opinion that nobody, especially barefooted kids who aren't wearing their bike helmets, who are just cruising to the wharf, will ever use this. The people who live there now do not respect either side of the crosswalk. There is no point to put money aside for this. There's no need for it at this time. If we're going to do something, it's going to be, I would prefer these funds to be put into a reserve or to be funding the Canoe Beach sidewalk that goes from the Hive to the ballpark. That is a way better allocation of funds for a walking path than this simple one to 25 houses. That is my opinion, and I will vote and urge you all to vote against this.
Councillor Wallace-Richmond?
Thanks for a second opportunity. I mean, I'm not a rail traffic engineer. And the reason I asked if CP Rail had asked for changes here was to sort of determine whether this is a want or a need. CP Rail isn't seeing the need to put this here. And as much as I support our neighborhood, I don't see us putting that money in this project at this time.
Any other speakers to the motion before I call a question? Call a question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion fails. Councillors Lindgren, Wallace-Richmond, Flynn, Cannon, Eliason, and the mayor are opposed. Okay, continuing. Councillor Eliason, Section M, Blackburn Life Trail Extension. $20,000. It is not in the budget. Councillor Eliason, you'd like to speak to this item?
So really $20,000 for that much gravel? Or is that built to a standard that is pavable is my question to staff.
That would be built to a standard that would be pavable in the future. There's no sense paving it if we don't know if that's the actual path that's going to be used.
Okay.
So,
And there's no cheaper way to do it that, like, right now it's just lumpy and bumpy but people use it. You can, if you've been down there, you know that people have created their own trail there. I'm just wondering if there's any way that we can make it safer for the residents.
we can probably put the Bobcat on it and try something. Just do it. Just make a light trail.
Yeah. Even if we had $10,000 for it, I'm not even asking for money for my own bike park at this time because I don't even know how to start that fight. But I would say $10,000 from general revenue to improve this trail would be sufficient given staff and staff's creativity, especially if we get that double roller.
Is there a seconder to the motion? Yes. Councillor Lindgren seconds the motion. Councillor Eliason, would you like to speak to it further?
Yeah, we built this trail and we were expecting it to be finished a long time ago with our master plan. And it might not be the be-all, end-all finished trail, but it is used, and it is used by elderly people. And would be their only way in from a sidewalk, considering that Blackburn Park doesn't have a sidewalk, and we've got a sidewalk from all the residences to it. It's the shortest way to the Life Trail without walking all the way around. So I would, let's just try and improve it and make it a little bit better to get access to it. That's where their exercise equipment is. That's where the trails are, bathrooms, the whole thing. So, and they use it now. I just want to make it level. That's all.
Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Worship. And so as I understand it, 20,000 was originally in the specific referrals. And that was to get it to a standard that it could be paved in the future.
That's correct.
I guess I'm willing to support the motion if it's up to 10,000, but to run a Bobcat on that and use a roller, that can't be $10,000. I would be able to support 5,000 of staff time and initiative to make it safer and better, but to me, 10,000 is getting it. I just can't see how we can't improve it for $5,000, but I don't know anything about building trails, clearly. I agree we should do something. We might as well spend the 20 if we're gonna get it to, but why build it to the potentially paved standard if we don't know if that's where it's gonna go? So can we not do something for less, Director of Engineering?
Are you asking for a
Friendly amendment?
friendly amendment?
I don't know if it's friendly.
Find out if it can be done.
Okay.
Can it be done for 5,000, Director of Engineering and Public Works?
Your worship, we could build something for 5,000. I'm not sure I don't know what sort of surface we'd be able to put on there. But yeah, like I say, run the Bobcat, the roller, a few truckloads of gravel.
Okay. Well, at 10, I'm not gonna support it.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers to this item? Councillor Lindgren?
So I support us doing something about this trail. It is pretty treacherous to walk through there, and when it's wet, it's slippery, and you feel like you're walking in a ditch when you walk through there, and that's not a good way to present to our community. It's an area that we want people to use, and we keep talking about future development there. I think that we need to do something. So I would support an amount for them to go in and level it and put some gravel in so that it's safe to walk on and it's not a mud pit when it rains.
Thank you. Any other speakers to the motion? All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? The motion fails. There was a friendly amendment suggested to 5. I will accept your motion. What would your motion be?
5,000.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion? Councillor Lindgren. Any further discussion on the motion?
Kevin might agree to this one.
All those in favor? It's carried unanimously. Downtown Salmon, funding request for downtown day cleanup, $500. It is not budgeted yet. Any speakers to the motion or to the issue? Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, I mean, we could leave it the way we've been doing it. Every year we approve it in council initiatives. To me, that's not terribly productive. It's an event that lots of volunteers come out for. Downtown Salmon Arm organizes it in conjunction with Askew's. I'm not sure if it's staying called the Askew's Downtown Cleanup, but it's been very successful. Askew's provides hot dogs and helps feed everybody. It helps us reduce costs in the downtown. To me, this should just be put in the budget every year, like that $100 for the, whatever that was a while ago. And I don't think we need it in specific referrals or should be dealing with it as a council initiatives. So I make the motion.
Okay, and your motion is to put $500?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Lavery? Discussion on the motion. Councillor Lassen?
Thanks. In this bylaw, part 2, the improvement, beautification, or maintenance of streets, sidewalks on municipally owned land, buildings, or structures in one or more business improvement areas. The removal of graffiti from buildings and other structures in one or more business improvement areas. To me, we fund this. This is the contract that we sign with the Downtown Salmon Arm Association. I don't know why you would come back to get more money for the core service that you were to provide. Am I wrong? So I would say that while this is a good initiative, this needs to be a core part of their budget allocation. Because as far as I read this bylaw, this is what the job is, which is carrying out studies, making reports, respecting one or more business areas, right? So to me, that's it. So I can't support it because it should be part of the funds that are already allocated as per their contract.
Thank you. Councillor Lindgren?
So one of the things that I heard during the campaign period in October or whenever that was that we're not taking care of our light standards. There's cobwebs and dust, and so I'd be interested in supporting this amount of money plus another 500 if that's what it takes to make sure everybody that's down there has a broom to brush off the dust and the cobwebs off those light standards every year while they're doing that cleanup.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, just, I appreciate Councillor Eliason reading verbatim there, but nowhere in there did I hear garbage cleanup. I heard graffiti and I heard a bunch of other things, but honestly, if you haven't participated in it, which I've done it a number of times, it's a great event. All we're buying is garbage bags and gloves for people, and the community is involved, and to me, it's a very good use of $500. And I don't think what you read refers to this, but I might have misunderstood what you read. But I'm just asking council to support it.
Okay, I will call the question on this item. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Eliason opposed. Motion passes. Item number 2 under O, downtown Christmas lighting, hydro cost share exemption, $1,800. There's a note, the hydro costs are currently shared with the city under agreement. If supported by council, a motion will be required to terminate the agreement. Sorry?
Sorry, I don't have this on my list.
Okay.
So you guys have it on yours, but not on ours.
Okay. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. I am not going to make a motion for this. I have talked to Downtown Salmon Arm after staff made us aware that some 15 or 18 years ago, an agreement was signed that the hydro costs would be shared between the city and Downtown Salmon Arm. I've suggested to the Downtown Salmon Arm Board and to Lindsay that they make sure that when the contract renewal is discussed and all of that, it's determined who is going to be responsible for this cost. I think we just guess as to how much we charge them, because I don't think we monitor or measure exactly what that costs. So there's not necessarily a fairness there, but I do think that the old agreement said that this cost would be split in half. Is the cost the right amount to be split in half? I'm not sure, but I don't think I'll make a motion in this difficult budget this year and ask the DSA to make it part of their discussion on their contract renewal that's coming up, I believe, next year, this year. So.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Any other speakers to this issue? Okay, seeing none, we will move to P, Crime Stoppers, contributions toward new sign program, customized Salmon Arm signs, cost of $1,500. Anyone wish to speak to this motion or this issue? Okay, Councillor Lindgren.
Can somebody give us more information about what it's about? I don't know about this one.
Okay, ask the Director of Engineering and Public Works.
So, Your Worship, we had a letter come to Council Information a number of months ago, and we were approached by the local Crime Stopper Association, which is throughout the valley, and they were interested in seeing if Council was interested in putting up potentially 3 signs, but now it's looking at 2 signs and then having the city install them. The signs are worth $224. And then to install them, we'd be looking at potentially $650 to install, so $1,500 in total. And there would be one located on the west end of town and one on the east side of town.
Not interested.
And most of the communities in the valley have already done this. Armstrong, Enderby, Vernon, Kelowna. etc.
Councillor Lindgren, would you like to follow up at all? Okay, thank you. Any other speakers to this issue? Councillor Flynn.
Just a question, remind me, did we put some money, or is there money in this budget for the old Expo sign?
Yes.
And is there enough money, I thought we did, but is there enough money in that to do one of these signs in conjunction with that?
Well, we don't know what we're going to do for the Expo sign at this
Okay.
moment, so I would be reluctant to use that funding for this.
I guess I feel that if we figure out what we're doing there, that's a logical spot for it, in my opinion. And we decide we want to do it, that's something I could see taking out of council initiatives.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. That was my very thought, so.
And I'd change the logo.
Perhaps we wait, and see, and I would think we could get a salmon arm company to make the signs as well.
Yeah.
Councillor Wallace Richmond.
No disrespect to my fellow councillors, but this is not an attractive sign, and criminals don't read signs when they come to town. So I don't see any value in it. I think it's a fundraising opportunity for Crime Stoppers, and I think if they want our funds, then they should ask for a contribution.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to item Q. Councillor Lavery, implementation of transit route enhancements, 35,000. There is 35,000 presently in the budget. So I don't know, Councillor Lavery, did you want to speak at all to it?
Just briefly, and I know there's a couple of other requests about transit enhancements. I think this begins to cover some of those specific referrals.
Okay, thank you very much. So no motion necessary there. We'll go to R, Turner Creek Estates, painting a fence on Turner Creek Path. Cost of $3,000. It's noted it's a private fence. There is no budget presently. Seeing no speakers on that, we'll go to Salmon Arm Citizens on Patrol. Item U. Their historical funding operated by the city. And we have $5,000, and there is $5,000 budgeted, it looks like. I'll just check and make sure. Is there $5,000 in the budget for this?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, so no motion would be necessary. Did you want to speak to it, Councillor Wallace Richmond?
Oh, I would have made the motion if one was required, but no.
Okay, so we're okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll go to V, 2 picnic tables at Canoe Beach Dog Park, $10,000. There's not any money budgeted for that item at this time. Anyone like to speak to that? Councillor Lavery?
Thank you, Mayor Harrison. I think this is a good idea, and I guess I have a question or two. I know in our regular parks budget, it looks like we've got over 3 years, 10 picnic tables to be replaced. Is it A, possible to defer one of those to that area, and B, what would the cost be of a concrete pad that we could, that would make it work?
Your Worship, the concrete pad, so we've earmarked all the picnic tables that we have to replace. If it's council's wish, we could probably delay that, but we'd have to replace it at some point, because we've got, I think it's 13 tables that we're replacing over the next few years. And so we would have to increase that budget at some point to increase the replacement of those tables that are aging. So essentially the concrete pads are $4,000 and the picnic tables are $4,800.
So $10,000 would get you 1 picnic table there, it looks like.
2.
Is there a concrete pad there already?
No, that's the cost. So for 2 concrete pads, it's $4,000, and for 2
I'm
picnic
sorry,
tables,
for
it's
2.
$4,800.
Got you. Okay.
So given that, I'd make a motion to put $2,000 towards a concrete pad for 1 picnic table at the time that staff best determines over the next 3 years.
Okay, is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Lindgren? Do you wish to speak to that further, Councillor Lavery?
No.
Councillor Flynn?
Sorry, can I just clarify the motion?
Yes?
One picnic
The
table,
request is
one
for
pad.
$2,000.
Put in reserve for when one picnic table was part of the replacement process be redistributed to the dog park.
Okay, so I have a question for the Director of Engineering and Public Works. Is there any economies of scale to doing two pad and table at one time?
Well, there is, if you want to spend the money, but really, do we need two there is the question.
So, I mean,
Insufficient?
I think it makes sense to have somewhere for people to sit in that dog park area canoe. If we're gonna do this, I mean, I know you're trying to get something into the budget, but if it's $4,400 to do it properly for one, why wouldn't we just either defeat that and not do it and save it? Do it another year, or, I don't think we need to do it in reserve, and I'd be more in favor of doing it this year. One.
Okay, the motion on the table right now is for $2,000 for in reserve.
I'll vote against the motion.
Councillor Wallace Richmond?
Your worship, sometimes these referrals are interesting because citizens bring us a solution to a problem we haven't had a chance to look at, right? So what I read from this is people would like to have somewhere to sit down in the dog park. Does it necessarily have to be a $4,000 picnic table? Could it be a bench? Could it be something else, right? So I'm a bit reluctant to support the motion. I mean, for one thing, do the 10 picnic tables that we've already allocated, do they come with their own pads, or that's a separate?
Your worship, the picnic table program, the replacement program is to replace damaged tables.
I see.
And the pads are there already.
Okay, and you've identified.
It's not for new.
Not for new, right, okay. I just feel like this needs more thought, so I can't support the motion, but I do agree, people like to spend time at the dog park and would like to have somewhere to sit. But there are 13 great concrete tables at Canoe Beach, so.
Thank you. Councillor Eliason?
Yeah, I won't support the motion either. I think we need to figure out what we actually want to do there, and then do it. So, $2,000 in reserve. I mean, we could do that if we find out late this summer that we really want to do this. We have enough money in council initiatives. We can do it then, but it's a tough January.
Councillor Lavery?
No, I'll stick with the original motion.
Councillor Lindgren?
So I was wondering whether or not there'd be some appetite for allocating $5,000 to seating at Canoe Beach. Put that into the budget now, and over the next few months, staff can figure out what we need there, and then we could get it done this summer. So maybe it's just a couple of benches, maybe it's a couple of nice park benches, maybe it's a picnic table, but we won't know until we check.
Okay, so we'll vote on this motion and see how this goes, and then if you want to make a second motion, you could following it. Is there any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? Councillor Wallace Richmond, the Mayor, Councillor Flynn, Cannon, and Eliason opposed. Councillor Lindgren, did you want to try a different motion?
I would.
Okay. Please press your button.
Is that on?
Nope.
Yep.
Oh, you got that mic button pressed again.
I can hear myself. I'd like to make a motion that we set aside $5,000 to establish some seating at the Canoe Beach Dog Park this year.
Thank you. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Flynn. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Lindgren?
I think I probably did already, but I think people are right. We need to look at what's necessary down there, and we need a little bit of time to figure that out. However, if we don't budget for it, it's probably not going to get done. And I think we've established that it would be a nice thing to do, and it'd be an addition to the park. So if we can just set aside the money and then decide in the next few months how to spend it, I think that would be a good use of it.
Thank you. Any other speakers to the motion? Councillor Eliason.
Yeah, thanks. We've had a really long budget day, and we've had a lot of really, really tough decisions, and sometimes we will micromanage a $5,000 or $500 or a $300 or $3,000 one. To me right now, this isn't the highest priority on our list for capital upgrades at Canoe Beach. So I think that we've received it. We've heard the message that we would like to explore seating on that side. It's been brought to council's attention, but I don't think this is the time to knee-jerk reaction. Hey, let's put in some picnic tables, or let's do this right away. Let's look at it, and then later on in the summer, if we have funds, or if we have the priority, we have the staff time, or if we're not cleaning up a flood or a fire, then we can look at the implementation of seating there. So I won't support the motion, but we've heard the message at the table about seating on that side of the fence, and we'll look at it again as a group, and staff is aware of the problem.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace-Richmond?
Your worship, my point was, I've lost my, you're right, it's been a long day. I have no idea what I was gonna talk about. Forgotten.
We can come back to you if you would like. Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, I just had a question to staff. Does a pad and a 2 or 3 seat bench cost less than a picnic table?
The pad would cost the same, $2,000, and the bench would probably cost about half of the picnic table.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Wallace-Richmond?
I do remember now. I just wondered if the reserve for Canoe Beach could be the source of the funding.
Okay, that's a good question. Can we ask the Chief Financial Officer if those monies could come from the Canoe Beach Reserve?
Park. Canoe Beach.
Canoe Beach Park Reserve, is that
No,
what it's
there's
called?
several. Sea Beach General Improvement.
Sorry, which reserve are you speaking of?
It's Sea Beach General Improvements. Page 3.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
So it could come from the Canoe Beach.
General Improvements on page 3.
We have 5,000 coming out already, so there is 5,000 remaining at this time.
Okay,
Okay,
right.
so Councillor Wallace-Richmond, would you like to make an amendment to that motion?
Yeah, if it's okay.
From the Canoe Beach Reserve Fund.
The Sea Beach General Improvement.
It's on page 3.
Yes, under Parks.
Okay, you find it? Okay, who made the motion?
I did.
Are you comfortable with that amendment?
I am.
And who seconded the motion? Councillor Flynn.
I'm comfortable, but I'm going to ask for another friendly amendment. So.
All right, we'll can do one amendment at a time. Would anyone like to speak to the amendment to get the money from the reserve fund? Okay, then I'll call the question on that amendment. All in favor? Any opposed?
It's a
We
friendly
haven't
amendment.
approved the money
I
yet.
thought it was,
Yeah.
Okay,
What are we voting on?
It's a friendly amendment, so we don't have to vote on it.
Yeah, we don't. have to
oh,
vote.
you're right. Okay, I am losing that too.
And then
Okay,
I'm gonna,
fair enough. Thank you
now
for the
I'm gonna
correction.
pursue, sorry.
So we'll go back to the motion, which is to take $5,000 from the reserve fund. Councillor Wallace-Richmond, did you want to speak? Okay. Councillor Flynn.
Okay, I'm going to try the friendly amendment here because I think it might get accepted. They're asking for seating. If a bench on a pad costs $1,500 less than a picnic table, I'm quite happy if I'm down there, even though I don't have a dog anymore, eating my lunch at a bench. Can I ask the mover to reduce it to $3,500 and put a bench instead of a picnic table?
You could do that. Can I just add a piece of information?
Yeah.
That might be helpful? I don't have a dog either, but I have been down there with my son and his dog. And the reason that this request has come forward is because people with dogs want to use the picnic tables that are on the other side of that fence. And so they go to the other side of the fence, which makes the people who don't have dogs unhappy because they're not in the dog area. So that's what this motion's about.
Okay.
So I'm not sure a bench would solve the problem.
Okay, I'll withdraw that friendly amendment.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion fails. Councillor Lavery, Mayor, Councillor Cannon, and Eliason are opposed. Okay. Shuswap Lake Senior Citizen Society, with a number of items that is in the budget. So unless someone wants to speak to it, we'll move ahead. I don't see any speakers. Item W, Shuswap Grey Grebe Paddling Society, Marine Park Wharf Repairs. That we have spoken about already, and that is budgeted from reserve. X, Rita Morkey, installation of catch basin and rock pit, the alley between 10th and 11th Street Southeast, $10,000 item. Is there anybody that would like to discuss that one? Okay, Councillor Lindgren?
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to when Rita Morkey was here talking about this issue, and it seemed that this was somewhat of an issue that was created by the city somehow. I'm trying to remember how. Something to do with changing the grade of the alley surface so that it drains into their driveway now instead of where it used to drain. And if I'm remembering that correctly, and if we have some responsibility in that, I think that we also have some responsibility in mitigating the damage it may do to their home.
So I thank you, Councillor Lindgren. I think this is similar to item D, Laura and Mike DeFelice. It's in the same area. And so I'll just refer it to the Director of Engineering and Public Works and see if the study that Jen talked about, if this particular piece is also included in that study, because it might make a difference in what we do.
Yeah, Your Worship, this isn't included in the study as it's not really the storm drainage. There is no storm drainage along this laneway. And just in comment to Councillor Lindgren's statement, this lane has been graded and we've improved the lane, but we've lifted it with material. So therefore, it's higher than it traditionally was because we were getting complaints that it was rutting and whatnot. So we went in and did some improvements to it, but of course that changes potentially the flow of the water. Now I'm not too sure where it flowed before because it is the low spot. It's the dead center low spot of that block. And so one thing that we could potentially do is put a rock pit in and put a catch basin in. To remove the material would cost probably just as much as putting that drainage solution in. And unfortunately, a lot of the concern and issue is caused by the frequency of the storm events that we've been having.
Okay, I understand. So that's helpful to know that it's not related to the other and to understand the problem a little bit better. Is there any motion regarding this issue? Councillor Lindgren.
I'd like to make a motion that we spend up to $10,000 to put in a rock pit and reduce this drainage problem.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Lavery. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Lindgren, would you like to speak to the motion?
Well, just that I've already said, I guess, that if we've had some responsibility in raising the grade, which has increased the problem on their property, then I think we have some responsibility in mitigating the problem before it becomes a problem for their house and insurance costs and yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this issue? All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Councillor Eliason, Councillor Cannon, Councillor Walsh Richmond opposed. The motion passes. Go to section Y, Mary Lou McCausland, improvements to Shuswap Regional Airport, improvements to performing and visual art facilities, emergency preparedness. Would anyone like to speak to that issue? Councillor Flynn.
I'd like to make a motion to put $10 million in the budget to make all those happen.
So I think that motion's out of order. Councillor Lindgren.
I'd like to get more information about the Shuswap Regional Airport. I don't know anything about what happens out there or what services we provide. However, I did hear some people talk about that there were issues with emergency landings at night for emergency, like air ambulance type things, and there was tree issues. And so if that is the case, is there a responsibility for us to make sure that that's being taken care of at some point, and has anything been done up to this point to take care of it, would be my question.
Sure, thank you. I'll turn that over to staff. I'm quite familiar with all of those issues, but Director of Engineering and Public Works.
So, Your Worship, we did have some problems with air ambulance landing because 2 years ago, we were audited by Transport Canada, and they said that we had tree encroachments in our flight path. So we've been working diligently. We've removed all the trees in the golf course area. We've removed, we're getting to the final stages of removing any encroachments on the south end of the runway. And therefore, we can hopefully and potentially turn on the runway lights in the evenings. Because right now we don't have night operations. In speaking with Air Ambulance, they are concerned obviously with this because they can't do fixed wing landings at night. They can land helicopters. That's an ability that they have in the past as well. But typically on the longer flights to Vancouver or even to Kamloops and Kelowna, they use fixed wing. So it is a liability for us. But we've spent over, I don't know how much money. I think it's close to $500,000, if not more, on removing these tree encroachments over the last 2 years. So lots of work has been done. I guess I think that's about it. If you like anything else, I can maybe answer that too.
Appreciate that, and Councillor Lindgren, I would be happy also to sit down with you and go over it as the council representative on that committee, because it is quite complex and there's quite a bit to it, but I would be happy to do that.
Okay, I'm satisfied with that.
Councillor Eliason?
I didn't expect this budget meeting to go so long. So I have a 6 p.m. appointment that I can't get out of. So I would ask your worship if you wouldn't mind. Most of the other specific referrals are previously funded, and rather than going through them line item by line item and requesting information, I was wondering if perhaps we could just have anyone with any specific referral that remains to bring it forward or otherwise sort of like a consent agenda and say no thanks.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. I will breeze through quicker because I want to make sure that nobody's left out, but I think everybody has been here quite a long time, so I can't see objection to that. So the Shuswap Trail Alliance is funded. The transit passes. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion related to that? Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thank you, Worship. And I wish I had remembered about this when we had the 2018 council initiatives. I knew it was coming, but I didn't have the exact amount. I move that we spend $1,710 out of 2019 council initiatives to support this.
Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Lindgren? Anyone wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, if we don't carry forward council initiatives and we still have money in it and it would just go to general revenue, why can't we take it out of 2018 council initiatives before we carry forward anything to general revenue?
I think the simple answer to that is 2018 is over. Because what happens at the end of 2018, it collapses into general revenue. You can't access it in that way. I understand the issue.
But if there's money coming from unused council initiatives to general revenue, putting this out of general revenue should be a zero item is all I'm saying. If we have money left over, we haven't said what that's going to be on the revenue side. So this should be a revenue neutral item. I'm confused.
I understand. Would the Chief Financial Officer?
I think the issue becomes when the transaction revenue is recorded now that it's 2019. Our year end has been closed. As a recording timing, issue, I think it would need to come out of 2019.
So this motion is to take it from 2019 council initiatives, of which we cannot.
That's what I thought, 2019.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Flynn. Is there any other discussion around that motion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Yes, you may.
Then, just so I'm clear, that 1,710 will not be adding to the tax increase.
No.
Because it's coming out of 25,000 already put aside.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's a zero council initiatives. Thanks.
We'll go by the community housing strategy that is funded. Maureen McTavish, transit expansion, and that was referred to by Councillor Lavery. Vivian Morris, this is really pleased to see that $5,000 for the improvement and extension of the Foreshore Trail that is funded. Salmon Arm Museum Heritage Association, the operational funding of $113,000 is there. There is a request for $25,000. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to that? Councillor Flynn?
No, I was trying to figure out how to not spend that.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any speakers there. Okay, we'll continue. Patrick Riley, handicap doors, that is funded. Salmon Arm Roots and Blues, our annual funding is there. The funding for permanent power supply at the South Fields, $10,000 funded again this year. Would anyone like to speak to that? Councillor Eliason?
I'm interested in helping them get phase one done with the electrical rather than just halfway. So I would make a motion that we fund, instead of 10,000, we go to the requested amount for the phase one, including the electrical permit.
Which is $21,285 is what you're
Yes.
suggesting?
Increasing it by 12,000. So.
And is it possible just to see on the screen where we're at?
Yeah.
Thanks, Tracy.
While we're waiting for that, did we not already put 10,000 in last year's budget? And
Yes,
only
we
need
did.
12,000 more?
There is 10,000 from last year, so there's 20,000 there now.
Your worship, if I may, it's the 10,000 in the 2018 budget was approved to fund for the Shuswap Agricultural Association. They're the ones that had applied, but from my understanding of this process, the Roots and Blues are now taking over the project. So I would request that if you would like to reallocate that 10,000, that you make a motion to essentially reallocate it to the Roots and Blues.
Okay, and this 10,000 is not that 10,000, right?
This 10,000 is the 10,000 that's been carried forward.
Oh, it is the 10,000 that's been
Yes.
carried forward.
So we need to put
Okay.
12,000.
Okay, so Councillor Lyson, would you make the motion to move that 10,000 from the Fall Fair Association to the Roots and Blues?
If that's part of the motion that I just made for the 12,000.
I think we better do them separate, because it's two different pots.
I'll withdraw my motion that's currently on the table, and I'll make a motion to reallocate the 10,000
Okay.
from the SAS lift to R&D.
Thank you, and Councillor Cannon seconds it. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Your second motion, thank you, Councillor Larson.
Another motion for the extra funds to complete phase one.
Which is 11,285.
12,000.
No. Why is it 12,000? It's 21,285 is phase one.
Yeah, 11,285.
Okay, Councillor Flynn, would you like, or Councillor Cannon would second that motion. Councillor Flynn, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I was going to make the same motion.
Okay, any other speakers to that motion? All those in favor of the motion? Carried unanimously. BC Society for Prevention of Animals, we funded that. So on this last page, I'll give you a minute to look down it. If there are any items that you would like to bring forward, I'll allow you to do that. Just let us know what the letters are by pressing your button. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Your Worship. The batting cage at Klahani, is there a reserve that could come out of?
Director of Engineering and Public Works, I know you've been in contact with those Salmon Arm minor baseball.
I'm not aware of any reserve that could potentially come out of, unless it was the Parks Reserve, Parks Development Reserve.
And how have your discussions gone with Salmon Arm minor baseball and relocating or building that?
Your Worship, they've gone very well. They're a very aggressive group in the sense that they are willing to fundraise and do whatever they can. They are in need of a batting cage to continue the development of their minor ball program. and we would work cooperatively with them in finding a location for that. They are looking for something, like they were initially talking about just a batting cage with netting. They were then looking at something a little more elaborate with an actual structure, an indoor structure. But I think if council was willing, they would be amenable to any kind of support. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn, did you want to speak to that at all?
Not at this point.
Okay. My suggestion would be that we do work cooperatively and provide in-kind help as much as we can, and location at Klahani Park. I don't see any motion coming forward with monies at this time. Councillor Lavery?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Harrison. I just want to make a comment. It's not a motion at all about QQ, the chipping program. I think it's one of the ones that we have not funded for a number of years. I think it has delivered, and I'm not making a motion for it now. It has delivered value to and a lot of people relied on that. I'm going to suggest, and hopefully by mid-February, March, we are aware of our Fire Smart funding applications. There may be some opportunities, maybe not in year one, but in subsequent years to look at that again. And I think to change our frame on this, rather than it being a cost, to actually being a mitigation factor as part of an overall Fire Smart procedure. I would have liked to have seen this in here now. I'm not making the argument about 2019, but I think keep that in the back of our minds as we go forward here.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for your comment. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, and I don't want to drag on today, but related to that, the CSRD has moved to free yard waste year-round. So I'm not sure the chipping program is needed like it was, because, I mean, it does for people who can't get their stuff to the dump, but I still think the free yard waste year-round, working together as neighbor and friends, you can probably help people get their stuff to the dump.
Thank you. Last opportunity for any specific referrals, comments.
They want to come back to this.
Okay. Thank you for all of that input.
Excuse me, Your Worship. Sorry, may I ask a question?
Yes.
We were supposed to come back to the one on Andrew's shirt for the cost sharing. I just wanted to know if you wanted to
Right,
address
Councillor
that.
Flynn, I think you had wanted to relook at that. Did you?
Doesn't sound like I've got a lot of support.
Okay. Thank you for the reminder. So, Chief Administrative Officer, we've worked through the budget. There was a feeling to await first, second, and third reading. Is there anything else that we need to do at this time besides adjourn the meeting?
Well, Your Worship, we have a motion on the floor that's been amended several times, so we need to vote on third reading as amended.
Okay. So I think council's timeline is such that they would like to defer that. Is that possible, or how would it be best to handle that?
Well, I think it's possible, but staff would recommend that we deal with it today.
Okay, let's see what council's sense is. If councilors are comfortable dealing with it today, it was such a long time ago, we talked about issues. So the question on the table is to move first, second, and third reading of the budget bylaw, which we've just discussed, with the many amendments. Okay, is there anyone who has an objection to us voting it today? Okay, I don't see any objection to that, so I will open it up for discussion and comments on the budget. Let's just take a look where we're at in the end. Is it possible just to have Chief Financial Officer just review that for us? And just the bottom part, really. I don't think we need everything done, but just where we're at the bottom. So it looks like we started at 4.88 and we're at 4.25 presently. Okay, all right. Any comments from council? All right, I'm going to call a question then. All those in favor of first, second, third reading? Any opposed? Thank you, council. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Lindgren, Councillor Wallace Richmond, first and second.
That
All
was
those in
quick.
favor?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, staff, members of the public who have spent the day with us today. Really appreciate it. It was a long day, but a good day, I think.
Yes.
And by the way, the emergency program, you didn't let me speak to it. The CSRD budget is on the 30th of January. There will be costs towards the shoe shop emergency program
$11 a household.
being passed on to us, just so everybody knows.
I think it's $11 a house, I think.
Okay.